Om Shri Sai Ram. I welcome all the participants to the post-lunch session of Literate Webinar Series Edition 2 on exploring authorpreneurship. After an engrossing morning session, it is time to begin this session with a brief discussion on the works of Miss Anushka Ravishankar by Miss Satyashri Ji, MA English final year, and Miss Yada Lama, BA English final year student. They would be giving book reviews on the works of the popular children's author Miss Anushka Ravishankar. The two books chosen for the review are Elephants Never Forget and The Storyteller Tales from the Arabian Nights.
Om Shri Sai Ram. I offer my most humble pranams at the divine lotus feet of Mother Sai. Today, I am here to give a short review on Anushka Ravishankar's Elephants Never Forget. Anushka Ravishankar is a writer of children's literature. She is also the co-founder of the Duckbill Publishing House. During the time of her education, she was influenced by writers such as Lewis Carroll, Edward Lear, and Edward Gorey. Then she discovered her love for writing. She became a full-time writer after the birth of her daughter and has written and published over 30 books for children. She is sometimes called the Indian Dr. C.S. Some of her earlier picture books that won international awards are Tiger on a Tree, Catch That Crocodile, and Elephants Never Forget. The blend of humor, realism, and nonsense in her writing, as well as the charm created by her in her characters, has won her many fans in India and abroad. The book that kindled my interest in exploring this author is Elephants Never Forget. The title of the book was so appealing that made me wonder what the elephants never forget. This unique and catchy title made me start reading it. Her diction is very simple and gives a feeling of gentleness and delight while reading. It can be observed that the lines in her book are poetic and rhythmic in nature. The book is filled with illustrations which consist of just three colors, black, white, and blue. Though there are only three colors in it, the main character, that is the elephant, is highlighted in every illustration in such a way that the children get to know that the story revolves around it. In one of her conversations in a panel discussion, she says that illustrations are necessary for children. Though we might think that it is necessary for children to have their own imagination and we should not impose on them certain kind of pictures, in reality, children do love picture books more than the books filled with words. And these pictures, in fact, help them expand their imagination. Every time the children see the pictures, their way of imagination changes, and thus the pictures do not restrict their imagination. This is a wonderful statement that I can never forget. She has also used onomatopoeia throughout the text, which gives it a literary effect. This makes the illustration look realistic as well as keeps the reader interested. There are sudden changes in the atmosphere created by the plot. A quiet jungle is hit by a sudden storm, and once it stops, the sun shines, showing the elephant a new hope to survive. Similarly, when the baby elephant is seen enjoying along with his friend buffalo, suddenly a tiger enters, creating a frightening atmosphere. Along with the change in atmosphere, there also occurs a change in the emotions of the main character. Anushka Ravishankar has been a very influential writer for both children as well as adults. She has taken up the responsibility of chiseling the young minds of children through her stories. The book Elephants Never Forget teaches a great lesson of importance of family and the love that binds and nurtures the children. Given the present scenario, this story is highly relevant and educates children about family and the need to experience the familial bond which will help them become a better person in the future. This book also teaches the importance of gratitude towards their loved ones. More importantly, the story of the elephant enables the children to tolerate and accept others beyond their identity and appearance. Thank you. We have learned from her great lessons of how important family is to a child. Now, let us move on to see how she portrays a girl in a society through her stories. Over to Yadhalama.
This is an offering at Bhagwan Baba's lotus feet. I am Yada Lama and I shall be presenting a book review on Anushka Ravishankars' The Storyteller, Tales from Arabian Nights. The name of the book is The Storyteller, Tales from the Arabian Nights. The author is Anushka Ravishankar. The genre is children's fiction and the publisher is Penguin, India. When evening falls and lamps are lit, when the sky with the stars is rife, our king Shahryar, so wise and just, will take himself a wife, and the woman he marries will but one night be his wife, for in the morning she will be separated from her life. This was the deadly proclamation issued by King Shahryar, the almighty tyrant of the kingdom that stretched from Persia to China. When we start reading the story, we find that these lines are quite ironical, because the king is neither just nor wise. Now, the question arises here: will the female protagonist, Scheherazade, the chief minister's daughter and a well known storyteller, succeed in her feat to save the lives of the young women from the detrimental blade of the royal executioner? Take this magical tour into the land of kings and queens, jinns and wizards, where nothing seems impossible. Indulge yourself in the delightful tales woven and narrated by the eloquent Scheherazade. Find out yourself what the future has in store for this witty and courageous storyteller. Now, these are my personal views and analysis of the story. The story is about a storyteller and storytelling. Uh, in this way, the author has used frame narration in a very unique way. Each story is very well crafted and handpicked by the female lead. That when dawn announces the arrival of a new morning, King Shahryar is left for wanting more, delaying the execution of Scheherazade for 1001 nights. The female lead, through her stories, impart valuable insights and lessons about life and politics to the king. The story is narrated humorously that it brings pangs of pleasurable pain to our stomach. We also find ourselves on the edge of our seats when the nights end, thinking that the morning would bring the doom of our heroine. In the beginning, I myself despised the character of King Shahryar because he was very rash and he did not have he was not thoughtful and he did not think about the consequences before making decisions. However, as the story progressed, his character grew on me just the way Scheherazade grows on him. It is an amazing spectacle to witness the king's journey from a rash, unthoughtful person to a just and wise man. The choice of diction is simple so as to facilitate reading among young children, and it can be read as a bedtime story, making learning fun and intimate. The Arabian Nights is a tale told by many writers, thus, it must be very difficult to meet the excellence of the classic. However, Anushka Ravishankar has retold the story without the original charm being lost. It is still a story filled with magic and infinite possibilities. The strong character of Scheherazade as a strong woman, bold and independent, shows shows women in a different light. Since young children are very impressionable and their minds can be easily, sorry, and their Young children are very impressionable and their views and mentality can be molded. Thus, the character of Scheherazade portrays women as strong, brave, and bold, unlike the other female leads. She's not a damsel in distress, but she's someone who faces her problems head on. In the 21st century, we still see cases of gender inequality, where a girl child is expected to learn the household duties. I would say that it is rather a life skill which must be learned by both girls and boys alike. Another aspect of the story is that we find Scheherazade indulging herself in reading and enriching her mind, thus teaching us a very important lesson that times used in the enrichment of mind will always benefit and come in handy at all junctures of life. It is indeed her wit and the accumulated knowledge that wins the heart of the king. Therefore, the character of Scheherazade fits into the category of beauty with brains. With this, I come to the end of my presentation, and I am very ecstatic and excited to announce that, as a treat, we have a conversation with the author herself. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Anushka Ravishankar is an author of children's books and co-founder of Duckbill Books, a publishing house which is a part of Penguin Random House. Her writing career started with her first few stories published in Tinkle, a comic book published by Amar Chitrakatha. She has worked with popular illustrators like Pulak Vishwas from India and few others from South Africa and Switzerland. Later, she became an editor at Tara Books, a children's publishing house. She authored Tiger on a Tree, a book of nonsense verse that was translated into Japanese, Korean, and French. Nonsense verse is a form of literature that does not make any sense and employs strong prosodic elements like rhythm and rhyme. It is often whimsical and humorous in tone. Lewis Carroll was Miss Ravishankar's inspiration to try her hand in this form of writing. In fact, she was the first Indian English writer to use this form in children's literature. Miss Ravishankar also worked as a publishing director at Scholastic India. A few of her books, like Catch That Crocodile, Elephants Never Forget, and Tiger on a Tree, were inspired by real life incidents. Let us listen to Anushka Ravishankar in a conversation with Ms. Arati RM, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. Her key interests are post-colonial studies and literary theories from the 1960s. She's also interested in Aboriginal literature and creative writing.
Sairam ma'am, welcome to the Literate Edition 2 2021. We are glad to have you amidst us for this session. And
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
we are always introduced to writers from the West, be it J.K. Rowling or even Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew series. Like, in fact, personally, I grew up reading J.K. Rowling and Nancy Drew series, and you are one of the foremost writers who started writing for children. So, can you just tell us how you got into this field of writing for children?
Yeah, you're absolutely right that most of us, especially our generation, I think a little less yours, we grew up reading books and stories from the West. As you said, Nancy Drew, Enid Blyton, these were the things that we all grew up with, or with the classics, which also were from the West. But this has actually changed a lot in the last few years. Before I got into children's literature in around 1996, but even before that, this change had begun to happen. There was this magazine called Target, which had some really lovely short stories written by people who were writing for children for the first time. And those the people who wrote for Target are still writing now. They're still writing books for children, and that's where the slight, the germ of the revolution, if you can call it that, started. But when I joined, when I got into children's writing in 1996, another phenomena was happening, mostly in Chennai, surprisingly, which is that three publishing houses for children had come up. One was Tara, one was Tulika, and one was Karadi. Around the same time, all of them came up, and they were all doing beautiful books for children. Before that, also there was Children's Book Trust and National Book Trust who were also doing books for children. But the thing is that because they were subsidized and they were, the quality of the books was left much to be desired. Though the quality of the writing was great, the quality of production and all that left much to be desired. But these publishing houses started with the intention of improving the production quality and the quality of the books that went out to children. So you see, because unless the book is physically attractive, the child is not going to be tempted to pick up the book, right? So at that time, these three publishing houses started doing a lot of picture books. Mostly they started with folk tales because that was easy to access and easy to get writers to do. And I, luckily for me, came to Chennai at that time and happened to join Tara. I joined as an editor, and that's how I started writing for children. I had done a few stories before that for Tinkle, which was another really good magazine which had been running for years and which had some really excellent material for children to read. Because it's in the comic format, I don't think a lot of parents encourage children to read that, though I thought those Tinkle comics were fabulous. And still are, I guess. I don't read them anymore. So that's how. So when I came to Chennai and I joined Tara, and that's how I got into writing in a big way. Before that, what had happened was that when I was in Bombay, I started writing a few stories for children and I sent them to Tinkle. It was also because I used to find not enough books. There were books then, even then. There were books for children, but very few written by Indian authors. So I felt that lack when I went looking for books, because my daughter was small then, so we used to do a lot of exploring in bookshops. And so that kind of it kind of made me realize there was a gap. So I started, I thought I'd try it out. I always liked writing. I was actually a computer programmer, but I always liked writing. So I started, just trying to write a few stories and I sent them to Tinkle. And they liked them, and I started working for Tinkle on a freelance basis as I used to write the scripts for them. So I kind of got in like that. I got a toe into children's writing in that way. But when I came to Chennai and joined Tara was when I completely jumped in. And I left I stopped working in software and I decided to switch completely to children's publishing.
That's nice. Okay. Your books are known for pleasure reading, or I can even frame it like what according to you is more important? Should a child read for pleasure, or should a child read looking for a moral purpose, looking for some sort of moral in a book?
Yeah, you see, the thing is that in Indian, even now, a lot of parents still ask, what does the book teach? They're still interested in that. But I personally feel that reading should be an act of, of pleasure for the child. Why did I get my child to start reading? It's not because she could learn so much. I mean, she'll go to school and she'll eventually read and she'll eventually have to read like big tomes of physics and maths and history and whatever. But the point of reading storybooks is for pleasure. That's what I personally feel that there should be. I write only for fun, right? So this is an idea that doesn't sit well with a lot of Indian parents. I remember this time when I was traveling in a train, and there was a young man in the train, and he asked me, you get chatting, and he asked me what you do, and I said I write books for children, and he said, what kind of books? So I said I write funny story books for children. So I showed him, I had some books, a couple of my books with me, showed him, and he just couldn't understand why I would write books that, my books, a lot of them are pretty absurd, because that's what I like to do. And so he just couldn't understand. And I kept telling him, but the point is that children should enjoy reading. They should want to pick up a book and read it for fun. And he just couldn't get his head around the idea. Finally, he said, okay, I get it. You get them interested in reading and then they can read real books. So the idea that a book without a moral or without which doesn't give you information can also be a real book is a very difficult idea for some people to get, but it's changing. It's changed tremendously since I'm talking about like 20 years ago, right? When I started writing. Now it's changed a lot. There's a lot more, a lot of people have understood the joy of reading. I won't even say it's not about the importance of reading so much as the pleasure and joy that you get from reading, and that I think is important.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, like though you assert like when I read couple of your books, I always come across certain values, okay, values or morals that I find very close to my heart as a reader. But you always assert, like this is not the first time I'm hearing this from you, but you always assert that you don't write in a right to preach. But for instance, there is one book of yours, Elephants Never Forget, and that book has come out with a very good moral value. Like, does this happen consciously or how? Yes, ma'am, yes, yes.
So this is the thing, okay? I've been accused of this a lot, that I have a lot of deep meaning in my books. And I don't do it deliberately. See, I write, if there's a story to tell, and I write the story. So with Elephants Never Forget, what happened was that I was watching a TV program on Discovery, or I think either Discovery or National Geographic, and there was this image of an elephant that was living with a herd of buffaloes. Okay, so the person who was doing the program obviously didn't know how the elephant had landed up. They just found it a very strange phenomenon, which is why they were showing it on TV. That there's this elephant who lives with the buffaloes, who helps the buffaloes, who runs around with them. So this book came out of the curiosity that it kind of sparked in me to understand how could that have happened? How could an elephant have ended up living with a herd of buffaloes instead of going back with the elephants? It was a forest with many other elephants in it. So the story I made up was just out of curiosity, which is what a lot of us do. We're trying to understand why something happened. So you write a story to kind of explain it, right? So, which is all I did. It happens to have, see, the thing is when you write anything, as a children's author or any other writer, when you write, your own interests, your own ideas of the world, your own worldview will essentially inform your writing, right? Whatever you write. So I think to that extent, my love for animals, my own idea of what, like I could have had the elephant go back to the elephants, but I preferred to have the elephants stay with the buffaloes. That was my choice, right? It was a creative choice that I made, and it is in line with my own worldview, right? So that is bound to happen in any book. So even if a book is written just for fun, your worldview is bound to inform the book. Like in Catch the Crocodile, if you've seen that book, it's about a crocodile that's stuck in a ditch. Again, that book came about because I was in Baroda when the floods happened, and I read about a lot of crocodiles that escaped from the zoo getting stuck in ditches and wells and all that. So that was the seed from which the book grew. But the rest of it I made up, right? Different characters trying to get the crocodile to go, and then my solution was that a child comes and says you just have to give it fish and it will follow the fish to the river or wherever. So again, there is a very strong environmental message there. It's about letting animals be and not forcing them. It's also a bit of a thing about how much we are encroaching on the environment of animals. Both Tiger on a Tree and Catch the Crocodile touch upon that, because the tiger's habitat has been taken over by humans, so the tiger has nowhere to go. Similarly with the crocodile. So these are things that are there in my mind. But when I'm writing the story, I'm only focused on the story. I'm not focused on what it will teach and all that. But like I said, my own concerns will inform my books. That is something that happens to all of us who are writing.
Okay. this takes me to another question regarding the elephants never forget. And there is this portrayal of monkey in that story. Like, why is there a twist, ma'am? Like, usually, like, we always see monkeys. Look, they are known for their antics, but somehow we've come across monkeys who are known for their mother Leela. We would have watched a clip or two on a TV, or we would have come across a clipping where a monkey nursing a puppy or something. But in your book, you've just made a twist, I would say, that the monkey is actually portrayed in a negative shade, if I'm not wrong.
Well,
Like,
the
why
monkeys
is
in
it
the book
so?
are just being monkeys. I wasn't being particularly,
Okay,
judgmental.
but when compared to the buffaloes like which are known for their unpredictable mood swings, like here the buffaloes are all caring and all loving when compared to the monkeys.
Okay, so the thing is
Why
this,
is
that
that
we
so,
do,
ma'am?
just
Is
as
there
we
any particular
stereotype,
reason?
no, just as we stereotype humans, I guess we also stereotype animals. But the fact is that all animals are different. Maybe if we had gone to another bunch of monkeys, they would have been kinder to the elephant. Maybe if we had gone to another bunch of buffaloes, they would have been unkind. We don't know. This particular buffalo happened to, since my story needed him to go with the buffaloes, he happened to meet a bunch of buffaloes who were hospitable and who wanted him, who kind of took him along and took him under their wing. But it could have happened another way, but then that would have been a different story, right? So the needs of your story also dictate the kind of character that you create.
Yes. Okay, ma'am. Yes. And moving on, like, what are the special features that you keep in mind while writing for children? And writing for children is very different when compared to the writing other writings. Like, what salient features that you keep in mind uh, while writing for
Well,
children?
actually, there's not much to keep in mind. I don't believe that one must simplify vocabulary for children or anything. Of course, there are concepts that children won't understand, which you would not then put in a children's book. But it's a very simple kind of thing that I think all children's writers do, or at least should do. They don't, which is that when you're writing for a child, in your head you become the child that you were. You can't write for, first of all, you can't write for every child. You can't decide that children like this, so I will write about this, or children need to know about this, so I'll write about this, because children are as one child is as different from another child as one adult is different from another adult, right? So if I write, say, a horror story, there will be children who like horror who will read it, and there'll be children who dislike horror who won't read it. So I cannot write for every child. I write for the child that I was, essentially. So I think that's something that all children's writers do. I've spoken to many, and we agree on this, that when we're writing for a child, we have to be able to tap or go back to that child in our heads that we once were. And you can only write for that child. If you try to write for some child outside, some child that you imagine or you construct outside you, then the chances are that you will end up preaching or talking down to that child. So you have to kind of be able to become a child in the process of writing for children.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. And this takes me to the next question regarding the nonsense, like nonsense literature. Like, ma'am is well known for that, and in fact, you are the first one to explore nonsense literature in India. Like, non. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just a small correction. In English, maybe, but not
In India.
Yeah, not
Okay.
really. So that, we'll talk about that. You continue.
Yes. Yes. Nonsense literature has much more meaning than is perceived. And your comments on it, ma'am?
So to begin with, I'm not the first one to write nonsense in India. There's a lot of nonsense in folk traditions in India. In fact, I have helped to edit a book called Tenth Rasa, which is about Indian nonsense, which kind of is a collection of Indian nonsense, starting from folk nonsense and going on to contemporary nonsense. And Sukumar Ray in Bengal has written huge amount of nonsense in Bengali. So that claim is slightly. I think my publishers have said this, that I'm the first to write. Maybe in English that might be slightly true. There may be others who've written, but I've consistently written nonsense for children in English, and that may be true that I might be one of the first to do that. So whether nonsense makes meaning. See, the thing about nonsense is that, as you probably know, it started off with Edward Lear and Lewis Carroll in Victorian England in the late 19th century, right? So they started writing this strange kind of literature, which was silly and funny and absolutely made no sense, and it was given the name of nonsense. But so that's where nonsense started. But if you really, and there are now people who study nonsense. I have a friend has done his doctorate in nonsense, and so I have spoken to him a lot. And one of the few things that the definitions now that have been made for nonsense is that nonsense kind of straddles the line between meaning and non-meaning. So if you talk complete gibberish, for instance, then that is not considered nonsense by the nonsense purists, right? It is nonsensical in a common sense of the word, but it is not considered literary nonsense. Gibberish is not literary nonsense because it doesn't even seem to make sense. Whereas with nonsense, even though it doesn't make sense, there is that moment when you think that it does make sense. So that it's a very fine balance, and it's not an easy genre, therefore, because a lot of people write absurd stuff and call it nonsense, and it's not always nonsense. You write humor and it's called nonsense, it's not always nonsense. Nonsense is it's a very specific and very, it's a very exact kind of genre. So, for example, you must be familiar with Jabberwocky. It was brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the waves. Yes. All mimsy were the borogoves and mome rates out grave. That is Lewis Carroll, classic. But the thing is, there it makes no sense. But if you listen to it, especially read by a really good reader, you get a sense, you feel that it makes sense because it was brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the waves. So you get a sense of what is happening. It may not be what the author intended because these words have no real meaning. But it's only when you listen carefully you realize, oh, there's no word like brillig and there's nothing, slithy is not even a word. So you realize that later, but for a moment you think that it makes sense. And that is what separates nonsense from gibberish, and also nonsense from sense, because it actually should not make sense. So even though people do try to find meaning in nonsense, actually pure nonsense has no meaning. So, for example, Hunting of the Snark, which is one of my favorite books of Lewis Carroll, it's a whole book in verse, and it talks about a group of people who are going to hunt this completely mythical creature, made up creature called the snark. And there is no such thing as a snark, and there is no, so the whole thing is just made up and it's completely mad. But and it's completely pure nonsense in the Carolian sense, which is different, which I will come to, which is different from Lear's nonsense. But a lot of people try to find deep meaning in that book, and Carroll was extremely amused by this because he really did not mean anything by it. It was meant to be nonsense. It was not supposed to have meaning. So I know that people find meaning in nonsense, but actually there is no meaning. In real nonsense, when the writer is writing it, the writer does not mean anything. Right? The difference between Edward Lear and Carroll is that Edward Lear's nonsense is more visual, and Lewis Carroll's is more logic. It's like subversion of logic. So I tend more to write like Lewis Carroll, since I'm not a visual person so much as a logical person.
Okay. Like, what is your take when people try to interpret this so-called nonsense? Like ma'am was trying to tell us, like it's basically it's utterly nonsense. That's what you're trying to tell us. But what is your take on people interpreting that nonsense? Like even sometime back we were discussing about Lewis Carroll and how people were interpreting Lewis Carroll's nonsense, and they were attaching so many additional meanings to that. Like, what is your take on it?
My take is that, see, once you let something out into the world, you write something and you get out there, then you have no control over how people read it. Right? You absolutely have no control. So there is this very funny story that I have, which is that for the book that I was telling you about, the 10th Rasa, which is a collection of Indian nonsense, we were three editors on it. Michael Heyman was the main editor, and there were two of us from. So each of us was asked to write an introduction. I'm not a scholar of nonsense by any definition. I only write it. So I'm a practitioner. I'm not a scholar. So I told the publisher that I can't write a serious introduction to this, because whatever needs to be written, the others will write. They're scholars and they're academics. So I said, I will write an introduction, but it will be pure nonsense. Right? So I wrote a nonsensical introduction, which is completely, it had no meaning to it. But when people were reading it, they did not realize that it was nonsense. And I've had actually reviewers talking about my introduction as it was a serious piece of academic work. So people do, it's a little bit like Emperor's New Clothes, because actually it didn't make any sense, but they were trying to make sense of it, and I was finding it endless, honestly. So I don't mind if people take it seriously or whatever, but if you read it in the spirit, like for this org, for instance, I made it a point to say that it's nonsense. This is this book, the book of nonsense prose called org. So this is supposed to be the subtitle. So I have said they're mostly random and profoundly nonsensical, I have said, because I don't want people to mistake it for sense in any way. And also the introduction, everywhere we've said that it's nonsense, it's nonsense prose. But I'm sure there are people who say that, oh my God, this is so deep, because it's got mathematics and different. Very silly philosophy, if you ask me, but there will be people who find it deep, and that's fine. That's what.
Okay. Yes. Moving on, like, ma'am, your illustrations are dynamic, like always, like all of us, all readers, be it children or adult. In fact, like, I was captivated by your illustrations. That's how I began reading your books. And your illustrations are dynamic and they are larger than life. Like, do you always have an image in your mind when you sit down to write? Or is it just the illustrator's work that is that the illustrator's work that we see on this book?
No, of course it is the illustrator's work, and I've been very lucky like that, because I've had some fabulous illustrators, starting with Pulak Vishwas, who illustrated my first book. And I can't even say who illustrated my first book, but whose book I first wrote, I say, because in this particular book, the illustrations came first. So he had already done the illustrations based on a story that he had heard in the Sundarbans, and I wrote the text to it. And the thing to do when you're working on a picture book is to make sure that the text and the illustrations, there should be a tension between them. They should complement each other without repeating one another. So that is the tough thing with writing. When the pictures are already done, how do you write it in such a way that it adds something that the illustration doesn't already have, right? So, because otherwise you might as well have a wordless book. That's fine too. But so we kind of, I kind of wrote it in verse and made it slightly absurd so that it was tangential to the text. So that is how this book happened. Each book has happened in a completely different way. So that's the exciting thing about writing picture books, because it's a collaborative thing. You write the words and you don't know what the illustrator is going to do with it, right? Sometimes but when I'm writing it, of course I know I have a picture in my head, because it has to be visual, because if it's not visual, then there's no space for the illustrator to work. So if I don't think of it visually while I'm writing, then I will not be able to leave space for the illustrator. So I do think of it visually, but I am very happy to step back and let the illustrator do their work. So for example, again, Catch That Crocodile, which also was done by Pulak Vishwas. The way I worked on it was that I wrote the prose completely. I wrote it like a proper story, proper full-fledged story, like a thing. And then we gave it to Pulakda, and he did the illustrations. And Pulakda does fabulous characters. So when it came back with his illustrations, I just chucked my text, I kept the illustrations with me, and I rewrote the whole thing in verse. And
Yes.
so then I didn't need to describe the characters, which I had done in the earlier version, based on which he had done the characters. But then the final version, I didn't have to describe the characters because they're there in front of you on the page, so you don't need to describe them again, right? So that's the kind of dynamic that has to be there in a picture book between the illustrations and the writer. So quite often after the illustrations come, I change the text, or so it's a very fluid and dynamic process, the whole thing, and it's very collaborative, and that's why I like doing picture books. Because I like that, I love it when my words come back with illustrations in a way that I'd never imagined it. So it's great fun to do that.
And this collaboration is seen in the work, where like you find your works have that harmony of typography, illustrations, and artwork. Is this because of the collaborations that you have, ma'am, or
A
how is it
lot,
achieved in the book?
yeah. So a lot of credit for that also goes to the publisher and the
Yes.
designer, right? So the publisher is the one who visualizes the entire book, because I do the text and somebody else does the illustrations, and the publisher then finds a designer who will put it together. So a lot of my books have been designed by Ratna Ramanathan, who used to work with Tara at the time, and she did this whole thing with typography with Tiger, which was at that time very radical, to be honest. In fact, a lot of I remember showing this book to some well-known picture book writer who said that, oh my God, I'm going to start doing that with my books now, because she really uses the type to bring out the meaning. So the typography becomes almost one more element in the illustrative
Element, yes.
element of the book. So that is something that I think between Ratna and Tara, they have really been. I've been really, again, very lucky to have a publisher who takes. So I've got complete faith in Tara, in the sense that I give them the text and I know that they'll do the best possible illustrations with it. So that's, again, stroke of luck for me.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yes. And ma'am, right now we are like facing the pandemic. The pandemic has and is having a huge impact on almost every one of us. And being a writer, has it affected you? And how are you managing it?
Yeah. So at the best of times, I'm a very erratic writer. Right. I'm not a disciplined writer. Like a lot of my writer friends, they sit and write, a certain number of words every day, and they're very disciplined, and they kind of keep writing all the time. So I think those who work like that have continued to work like that during the pandemic. But my writing doesn't work like that. I have to have the whole thing in my head, and then I just sit down and write it. And I have been really finding it difficult to write in the pandemic, because especially the early days, the first and second wave, it was so bad. Things, you were hearing horrible things happening around, people dying, people falling terribly sick, and all of that. And the stress of it all, I was finding it personally very difficult to kind of get into that bubble and write, which I have to. That's the only way I write. I have to be in a complete bubble, and I was finding it very difficult to enter that bubble during throughout the pandemic. It's getting slightly better now because things are easing off. But there was so much happening. That time, it was also the time that the whole CA thing happened, and then the farmers. There's so much strife all around that I find it very difficult to write when there's so much happening. But that's not true of everybody, and I have again, it's just the way that people respond to things. A lot of people found it kind of therapeutic to just sit and write and kind of shut off all the stuff that was happening, which is also one way to deal with it. So different people deal with it differently. So yeah, so during the pandemic, a lot of people have written a large number of books, because they, people who have day jobs and who would normally not be able to work, have been able to sit and write. So it's been good for some and bad for some, like anything.
Yes. Yes. Ma'am, you're someone who writes, who edits, and you are also a publisher. Like, what do you enjoy the most, and which is very close to your heart?
See, the thing is, I really enjoy editing. Okay, the publishing was it's different game altogether. But I really enjoy editing. I love having a text that then I kind of make it the best that it can be, and that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. So I do enjoy it a lot. Um, with writing, it's a very different feeling. It's a feeling of like when I'm writing, I it's a very transcendent kind of feeling, and I think it's you can't describe it as happiness. It's a kind of you just get into a zone which is very difficult to describe. It's a very different act. But for me, what happens therefore is that while I'm editing, if I'm editing something, I can't write because to be able to write, I need to be. You also while editing, especially if you're editing a longer piece of text, you have to really get into the head of the writer to be able to edit in a way that it doesn't jar with the writers. So if you're changing a line, for instance, you can't. I can't write it the way I would write it. I have to write it the way I have to. If I'm editing it, I have to write it the way the writer would write it. So that requires a certain entering into the world of that writer. And then for me to come out of that and write my own stuff, I find very difficult. But I really enjoy editing, and I also, of course, like writing. Though I do write more under duress.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Uh, since like moving on, you had your own publishing house, that is Duckbill Publishing House, and as a publisher, what were the challenges that you faced, and how did it
So,
move? Yes.
so when we started Duckbill, we were very clear. Shayoni, my partner, and I, we started it.
Yes.
We used to work together at Scholastic. She was my boss there, and then we started the when we started the bill. It was very exciting times because we knew what we wanted. We were very clear that we didn't want to do folk plays, we didn't want to do mythology, we wanted to do contemporary books for Indian children, which reflected their contemporary reality and which were fun to read. That was very important. We didn't want moralistic, and they had to be well written, they had to be great fun to read. So we started with that, and we also wanted to find new writers because at that time there were few people writing, and they were writing for all publishing houses. So the one of the main things that we decided with Daktil was that we would find new writers. So to that end, what we did was we used to do workshops, writing workshops with people who had never written for children before, or who had written for children but in a different genre, maybe, and maybe for the younger children, because we had decided to publish only for ages 7, 8 upwards at that time. So that was all very exciting, finding new writers. There were many first-time writers whose first books were published by Duckbill, and then they've gone on to publish with other publishers, and that makes us very happy when we see them, going on to write great stuff. So that was very exciting for us. Where the problem arose was, I think, the sales, of course, because both Chani and I were both more interested and more skilled with the creative part of the work, which is getting the writers, getting the text, getting the illustrations, putting it together, all of that. We also then later on had another colleague called Ayushi. So the all three of us, we did everything. But the marketing and sales, when we started, was supposed to be done by another publishing house that we were a part of. But that partnership didn't work out, and we had to go independent. And once we went independent, it meant that we had to take over all the other functions ourselves, like sales, marketing, this, that, everything, accounts, accounts, yeah. So, and that became a little tedious for us after a while, but we were still doing it, and it was doing okay, pretty decent by publishing standards. I mean, children's publishing in India, Indian books, is not is not exactly a very money-making business, which we knew when we got into it. We did it more because we loved it and wanted to do it, and not because we thought we'd make a lot of money out of it. So it was great while it lasted, but I think I have no regrets about handing it over because I felt that Duckbill needed to grow, and we wouldn't have been able to give it the growth that it deserved.
Okay. Now, how is the situation now, ma'am? Has the situation changed for children's literature now? Or?
I mean, children's literature, definitely things have improved greatly in the past few years, but it is still a difficult sell, it's still difficult to sell. So we were very happy when Penguin Random House came with an offer and said that they would continue to do Duckbill under the imprint of Duckbill. So Duckbill is now
Yes.
an imprint of Penguin Random.
Print of random.
Yeah.
Penguin.
So they still continue to be Duckbill books, and we're very happy that Duckbill books continue to exist in the world. And Shayoni is commissioning Duckbill books. So whatever we started off with, the kind of books that we wanted to do, still continue to be done. So in that sense, in the larger sense, it's been a good thing for us.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. And this takes us to the next question. Like during the pandemic, we saw many writers publishing their works on their own. Self-publishing became very active during the pandemic. And as a writer, what is your take on self-publishing authors?
This is something that has changed tremendously. Earlier it was considered, one used to think that people who can't sell their work to publishers are the ones who self-publish. So there was a bit of a hierarchy in terms of how they were seen. But that has changed a lot. It has changed tremendously now, because we find that even in the West, even well-known authors are kind of switching to self-publishing now. They feel that that's the better model for them in terms of, because you see, the publishing model is not very the percentages are not great for authors, because the publisher takes the risk, the publisher does the puts the money, so the authors get a small percentage, and not all authors are happy about that, right? They would like to be more and the involvement of authors in the publicity and in the selling of the books has also gone up greatly now. Unlike before, now because of social media, we are all expected to do a bit of our own publicity. So to that extent, then if you're doing your own publicity, then it's a short step to publishing your own book. And if it's successful and it works and you're getting your readers, then I feel that's a great way to go. Like with somebody like me, I wouldn't do it, only because I find that whole business of keeping track of sales and all really not something I want to do. But if you are happy to do that, then I think it's a great way to go. And especially with Kindle and Amazon, that a lot of people are publishing books which are doing very well.
Yes,
My
yes.
friend Andali Vajit, who's published her new book recently, she's getting fantastic number of readers in Kindle.
Yes, yes.
So I think it's a good way to go. It's a good option for writers.
Okay.
It's not easy to get people to come and read your book. I don't know how you do that, but I guess that's why people who are already known, for them it's a great option, because people already know you, and then so they'll anyway read your books. If you're starting off, I'm not sure how you'll go about. If you've got a good social media presence, then yeah, or you tie up with influencers. There are ways to do this. I belong to a slightly, I'm a bit of a dinosaur like that, because I don't belong to that social media savvy generation. So I find it a little difficult, but I'm sure young people will find new ways to, get their books known.
Yes, nice. Okay. We are coming to the end of the session, actually. Share a few words of inspiration for the budding writers.
Right. So I don't have much to share in terms of how you go about becoming a writer. But the thing is that if you're interested in writing, then there are 2-3 things that I always think are important. One is you've got to be interested in the world. You don't, especially if you're writing to children, what happens is you tend to think, oh, it's children's books. What do you need to know? You just need to, you don't need to know much. But that's not how it works. You have to have an interest in many things in the world to be able to write. Even a small thing, like I said earlier, whatever you write is informed by the things you know and the things you see and the things you think. So the more you read and the more you understand the world, the better your writing will be. The more you understand literature, the better your writing will be. So read, read, read. You have to keep reading, read different kinds of books, and because that is ultimately that's the only way you learn to write is by reading and reading and reading a lot. The other thing I think is very important for any writer is empathy, being able to put yourself in the shoes of other people. I think any
Yes.
writer who doesn't have empathy, it shows in their book because the book will be, it will be one-sided. It will be. I feel one of the because you're writing about so many different characters. There'll be good characters, there'll be bad characters. You should be able to put yourself in the shoes of the bad characters as well. So empathy is a very important quality for a writer. So yeah, and you have to keep writing. This is very rich coming from things I don't, but I know it's important because I can see that when there's a gap and I haven't written for a long time, I find it so difficult to get writing again. So keep writing, keep writing. Even so, this is something that my friend Ravishankars has just given me as an exercise. He's told me that I have to write few words, 5 or 6 words every day, and so he checks on me and makes sure I'm doing it, and I find it really helps because it kind of it's like at anything, no? When you do exercise, your muscles get more used to it, and you get better at it. So you got to keep writing. So keep writing, keep reading, and have empathy for the people around you. Sorry, those are all the wise words I have.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Can we have the honor of hearing some extract from your books since you showed your books? Like, we are just curious. Can we hear it in your own voice?
Sure. Shall I read from Moin? Shall I read the Moin song? So,
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
context, which is that Moin finds a monster under his bed, and the monster says that you can only see the monster if Moin draws the monster. Now, Moin is a very, very bad artist. He's terrible at drawing. He can't draw to save his life, but he has to do it because the monster says if he doesn't do it, then Moin will turn into a suitcase. So now, the monster is now singing this very silly song, and Moin has to draw the monster. The monster is describing itself through this song. So I'll just read that bit, which is eyes like flames and nose like pails, ears like horns and teeth like nails. A scary, fearsome sight to see. Monster, monster, monster me. Wait a minute, shouted Moin. What do you mean nose like pails? You mean you have more than one nose? Oh, bah, what a silly boy I've got. I mean, my nostrils are as deep as buckets, of course. Why can't you say what you mean then? Said the monster. It's said Moin, sorry. It's obvious to all but the meanest intelligence. That's a clever way of saying you're stupid, said the monster. Some people are so stupid they can't even say what they mean, muttered Moin. The monster started singing again. Skull-shaped mole on rock-like chin, long green hair and purple skin. In the dark you'll scream to see. Monster, monster, monster me. Drum-shaped chest and arms like trees. Bamboo legs on feet like skis. Terrifying as can be. Monster, monster, monster me. There was silence as Moin drew the monster part by part, slowly, carefully, and precisely. Have you finished? Asked the monster. Shh, can't you see I'm drawing? Finished? Asked the monster after half a minute. Wait, said Moin. The monster waited for half a minute more. Finished? Almost, said Moin. Right, here you are. Now, hold up the paper, the monster said. I'll look at it as if I'm looking into a mirror, and then I'll appear. So Moin held up the paper, and the monster appeared. Eek, said the monster. Eek, said Moin, startled to see his drawing suddenly turn into a live creature. Ow, 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 what have you done? What have you done? Wailed the monster. Why, what's the matter? This is not how I should look, wept the monster. I'm fearsome. You made me look funny. I've drawn you exactly as you described yourself, said Moin, miffed. He thought he'd done a splendid job of drawing the monster. I can't help it if you don't know how to describe yourself. I'm supposed to be purple. Oh, yes. Sorry, I ran out of purple, so I used the closest color I could find. Pink. Bright pink is the closest to purple. And why are my legs so thin? They're bamboos, aren't they? That's what you said, bamboo legs. These are not bamboos, they're drumsticks. If I don't watch where I'm going, some cook will pluck them off and make a sambar out of them. What rubbish. Drumsticks don't look like that. Bamboos don't look like this either. And what are these things I have instead of feet? Skis, of course. These, you call these skis. They look like blue brooms. I don't know what skis look like, said Moin. I guessed. I'm very good at guessing. They look kind of skiish to me, skittish and kind of brushy. And which animal has horns like these? Asked the monster. Oh, they were supposed to be animal horns. These are the horns. I thought you meant the kind of horns that auto rickshaws have, the kind that go pom pom. You mean I'm going to be walking around with auto rickshaw horns? Oh, whoa, said the monster. So finally, the monster is very unhappy. But now that he's in Moin, he's been drawn by Moin and he's come to life, he has to stay with Moin forever. So the rest of the story is about Moin being stuck with the monster and trying to get rid of it. So yeah, that's about
Thank
what
you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. This brings us to the end of session, afternoon session. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patient
Thank you
listening.
so much,
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Saira.
Bye.
Thank you, Anusha ma'am and Aarti ma'am, for that wonderful session. The phase of childhood is indeed the most important one in our lifetime, and introducing children to reading is the best way we can steer their lives towards a productive living. And when parents put their hands on the right book for their children, it is no less than a blessing. And for all the parents, we just heard in such an interesting way ma'am rendered the story for us. Please do pick Miss Anushka's books for your children, for the way she understands children's hearts and minds, carefully designs her pages with all the graphical imaginations, is very akin to the picture cloud in a child's mind. Anushka ma'am, it was such an appropriate advice to the aspiring children's authors that empathy is what they must write the tales with. Only then they can enter children's hearts and talk to their minds appropriately. Thank you, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time and sharing your insights with us. From the world of children's fiction, now let me transport you all to the world of mythology. And in the very contemporary times, one of the Indian authors who has become a renowned name in the mythological genre is Miss Sai Swarupa Iyer. So, up next are the two sessions. One, a discussion on her works, and second, a deliberation with the author herself. For the first session, I invite Ms. Srinidhi, Research Scholar of English, and Ms. Meghna, the final BA student, for a discussion on the topic, Balancing Liberties with Responsibilities, Insights from Sai Swarupa Iyer's works. Over to Srinidhi and Meghna.
Om Shri Sai Ram. Salutations to our founder chancellor, Bhagwan Shri Satya Sai Baba. Greetings and Sai Ram to all the eminent academics and all the enthusiastic participants. Professor Vishwa Adluri, a renowned Mahabharata scholar and a professor of philosophy at the Hunters College, New York, remarked that Mahabharata is more engaging than any other story or novel, not because the epic features certain incidents, but because we can relate to the passions, sorrows, and dilemmas experienced by individuals in those incidents. Thus, Mahabharata, along with Ramayana, has transformed high abstract philosophies of the Upanishads into an aesthetically appealing literary work which has touched millions of hearts. Many contemporary writers have been inspired to retell these stories under the genre of mythological fiction. Author Sai Swarupa Iyer is one such inspired and gifted writer. But what sets her apart is that She chooses to call this Puranic fiction and not mythological fiction. Also, her retelling of these stories is very balanced, and this renders a certain profundity to the foundational text of our civilization. Furthermore, in Draupadi, the novel, the author, through the voice of Uttara, emphasizes on the significance of retelling history. Allow me to quote her here. The whole point of reciting the records of the past is to learn from the exploits of our ancestors, take pride in their valor, strength, and courage, while gaining wisdom from the stories of their tribulations. If people judge their ancestors because of false notions about history, it is only a matter of time before the population is uprooted from the values their ancestors fought for and falls apart.
Indeed, studying Sai Swarupa Iyer's Puranic fiction has allowed us to grow deeper in love with and gain reverence for our ancestors. In today's discussion, we shall endeavor to share our insights from Sai Swarupa Iyer's novels entitled Draupadi, The Tale of an Empress, Rukmini, Krishna's Wife, and Abhaya, The Legend of Diwali, Narakasuravada Reimagined. Oh yes, with Diwali fast approaching, you might want to read this book to celebrate Diwali, knowing the festival in its true spirit. So, here is a quick outline of our discussion. A significant part of this discussion is on the kind of liberties enjoyed and responsibilities borne by the women characters in Mahabharata as portrayed in Sai Swarupa Iyer's works. We will then talk about the commonality in the way these women strike a balance between their rights and responsibilities. In the last part of the presentation, we will highlight how this balance is also reflected in the author's own craft of retelling stories of the Mahabharata. To conclude, we shall sum up these insights and present our key takeaways from this discussion as aspiring writers.
So the first character we shall be discussing today is Draupadi. Sai Swarupa's Draupadi is neither a vengeful woman nor a wronged woman, but the empress of Bharatavarsha. She's portrayed as a woman whose intellectual prowess saved her immediate family and her global family of Bharatavarsha from the clutches of Adharma. The author writes that even as a young girl, Draupadi wielded a strange power over the men in the family. Many had dismissed this trait by calling it the typical pampering of the youngest child, something that doubled in magnitude if the last child was a girl after 3 boys. But Draupadi was very different from a pampered princess. She ensured that she learned of every state of affairs pertaining to the kingdom of Panchala, her home. This liberty only further extended and grew as she became the empress, Samragni of Bharatavarsha, by virtue of being the wife of Yudhishthira, the eldest among the Pandavas. Her opinions and advice in the matters of statecraft and warfare were immensely valued and solicited. This right to information, right to speech, and right to expression that she got both at her natal home and at her marital home only made her more perceptive and grounded. She did not recklessly exercise her liberties.
Perhaps this was the reason why her Krishna Vasudeva deemed her worthy of taking the responsibility of Bharatavarsha, don't you think?
Indeed. In fact, Krishna, in one of his earliest meetings with Draupadi, tells her, and I quote, "I desire that you consider not just Panchala, but the whole of Bharatavarsha as your home, Sakhi." After her marriage to the Pandavas, Mother Kunti too asks of Draupadi to be that force that binds the Pandavas together. Her responsibility is very huge: to preserve the legacy of Pandu, to inspire his sons to gather their strengths.
These sound very lofty. We've hardly heard about these parts of Draupadi's life.
Yes, indeed. This is what makes the narrative of Draupadi stand out from all of the popular cultural narratives that we have read about Draupadi. Talking about responsibilities, yes, they did seem daunting. However, not to the point of inaction. They were her propelling force, in fact. While reading Draupadi, the novel, I also got a glimpse of Rukmini, and I just couldn't stop admiring her. What was it like for you, Meghna, to read an entire novel from the perspective of Rukmini?
Well, it was an enlightening experience. She makes me proud as a woman. In the novel Rukmini, Krishna's wife, Rukmini is not merely portrayed as the pretty and devout princess wife of Krishna. She is the Shakti who holds fort in Krishna's absence. Prior to her marriage to Krishna, Rukmini, though respected, was not allowed in courtrooms, and often her opinions were not taken too seriously. However, her piqued interest let her eavesdrop here and there. Saiswarupa Iyer writes, and I quote, eavesdropping on conversations around state affairs started as a childhood pastime for Rukmini. Her father did not mind at first. When her brother started objecting, Rukmini was only incensed enough to rebel and do it more, and as a result, she got to know most of Rukma's plans. She secretly enjoyed it when they failed. She enjoyed it when they failed, not in vengeance, but because she knew that they were conspiring against her Krishna, following the evil Jarasandha. While she had to take liberties at her natal home, her marital home gave her those liberties.
True. In fact, there is this point in the book when Vasudeva is informed of Krishna that Rukmini is experienced in statecraft. A very surprised Rukmini thinks, and I quote, if Krishna valued what her brother called eavesdropping, backdoor meddling, and a lot more as experience, there was a lot to live up to. Also, her rebellious choice of walking away from her engagement to Shishupala to wed Krishna is yet another instance of liberty that she exercised. The novel reveals that Rukmini's choice also turned out to be one of the most responsible actions that she took, both as a woman and as a citizen of the Bharatavarsha. Is it not?
Very true. Firstly, this is because she chose to break away from the domineering shackles of patriarchy that her home, the kingdom of Vidarbha, was subjecting her to by violating the institution of marriage to play power politics. Secondly, in distorting Jarasandha's design of hegemony, of binding his own minions, Shishupala of Chedi and Rukmini's brother, Rukma of Vidarbha, through a marriage alliance, Rukmini's marriage to Krishna turned out to be a game changer in the Mahabharata. Interestingly, her marriage to Krishna was an adventure in itself, and it involved her taking the place of Krishna himself in his absence from Dwaraka and speaking on his behalf whenever the Yadava Confederacy met. Well, it was a liberty to be able to second guess Krishna, but it did take its toll on Rukmini. Durvasa remarks, all because you chose to wed a man against your parents' wishes. Your shoulders have to now bear the responsibility of his destiny. However, she did all this happily.
It is very heartening to note that a character who gets eclipsed in the drama of Mahabharata gets a voice in the words of Sai Swarupa Iyer. Well, talking about Rukmini, I get reminded of yet another admirable character, and that is Abhaya. She's an eponymous protagonist, a Manasa Putri, or a mental construct of Sai Swarupa Iyer. She's rightfully named after her fearlessness. The author introduces her with the words, fearless to the core, she will become the shelter, the refuge to many. So you can see how responsibility fell upon Abhaya's shoulders very early on in life. In fact, when her kingdom was deceitfully attacked by the prince of Avanti, that is Anuvinda, Abhaya quickly stepped up to take the place as a protector of Anagha. She in fact deemed it her responsibility to get her subjects to safety. Also, Dharmasena, her father, says these words to her, which are very clear. Escape, Vatse. Don't let them get to you. Don't be my weakness. Well, Abhaya being Abhaya certainly did not escape. She fought Anuvinda as a responsible princess and also managed not to be captured, thereby not turning into a father's weakness.
There, I can see how she exercised her liberty and still was being responsible. A recurring motive in the story of Princess Abhaya is her wish to never be her father's weakness. She says, "You are a king, Janaka. I don't want to become your weakness." And her father readily supported her. But she wasn't going to run away when her father and her kingdom needed her. I love how Abhaya enjoyed a certain freedom to her own life. Unlike Rukmini, Abhaya is encouraged to carve her own destiny when she is provided the access to the knowledge of administration and even taught how to wield a weapon. Even at the age of 12, she had a fair idea about her father's dealings with Avanti. She had been exposed to such affairs of state since she was a toddler, writes the author. Although she was sent a marriage proposal from Anuvinda, the prince of Avanti, she was never forced to accept the proposal. She did have second thoughts about about the ripples her decision might create. However, neither did those thoughts nor her family exert any pressure upon her to do anything that she didn't wish for.
Well, I think she just seemed to know what to do or what to speak when and where. In fact, Rukmini and Draupadi too had such a clarity. The similarity in their manner of balance is too profound not to be noticed. It is to be noted that all their experiences, both joyful and sorrowful, both relating to their responsibilities and liberties, are illuminated by their intellect and governed by dharma. It is the purpose of dharma sanstapana, rather love for righteousness, that help them navigate life as they exercise their liberties and discharge their responsibilities. I remember this very sweet and poignant moment, also a moment of tension between Rukmini and Krishna, when she reproaches Krishna for being careful and tight-lipped about his mission. She preaches dharma to Krishna when she says that at times dharma should involve being the woman who loves you into confidence, taking the woman who loves you into confidence, then blocking her out. She says this being fully aware of the huge responsibilities this liberty which she was seeking would bring her. It just goes on to show how she viewed her rights and responsibilities with the lens of dharma.
Also, Draupadi, in her conversation with Kunti, says, "We have to establish dharma and emphasize to the world that the driving tenet of this land, dharma, is not a static code of unintelligent rules, but a dynamic counterbalancing force." I think all women have this innate capability of balancing their liberties with their responsibilities. What do you think? Sai Swarupa Iyer's manner of writing itself reflects such a balance.
Well, I'm not sure I want to get into that feminist discussion because, mind you, their love for dharma comes from their association with Krishna Vasudeva, the one beyond all genders. But yes, I do agree with you on this point about Sai Swarupa Iyer's novels reflecting such a balance. Perhaps it is this balance that renders an immersive quality to her Puranic fiction.
Yes, the balance between creative liberties and responsibly representing her characters, some of who were our ancestors. The creative liberties that she takes in imagining the story world of her characters is akin to worship, she says. Additionally, the author writes in her preface to Abhaya, the novel, and I quote, "Creative liberty is not something new to Indic literature. In the medieval period, the aspect of Prabandha became popular in Telugu literature. Prabandha is a literary piece that explores and expounds a Puranic episode, taking generous liberties with the versions in the root scriptures. Prabandha explore human angles of thought and often explore the Puranic episodes from the perspectives of fictional characters or obscure characters. They are judged by the depth of the thought and philosophy they churn out than by the so called authenticity of the events."
Wow. So the concept of what is called mythological fiction or Puranic fiction is not new to Indian literary tradition. The mention of creative liberty reminds me of Abhaya, the novel. What better example for Prabandha than the story that explores the episode of Narakasura Vadha from the perspective of a fictional female protagonist, Abhaya Dharmaseni. Also, I would think that this novel is a fine example for socially and culturally responsible Puranic fiction. For Sai Swarupa Iyer, based on her intense study of versions of Mahabharata, explains the philosophy of Krishna and attempts to dispel the mystery behind the criticized marriage of Krishna to 16,000 women, with bits of wisdom extremely pertinent to the modern context. At the heart of such a balance is dharma, a dharma to represent our foundational text aesthetically with its rasa and bhava intact.
Yes, this is exactly what Shanti Pasumarthi, an author herself, writes about Sai Swarupa Iyer in an extremely thorough review of Abhaya in the Swarajya magazine. She observes that a balance of this sort is important, more so at a time when popular culture narratives have its authors sometimes taking liberty to the extent of morphing the characters to a point that there is not even a semblance of the original. In fact, the depth of characterization, as visualized by the rishis, is hardly kept in mind. Sai Swarupa Iyer works within the framework of dharma, embellishing the characters, keeping their core, and maintaining their ideals intact. Also, this balance we gather from her past interviews is an inspiration that she derives from Sri Vedavyasa's Mahabharata.
Truly remarkable. So, Meghna, my takeaway for life from our discussion of the women characters in Mahabharata and the writer who crafted their characters is that taking liberties fearlessly and discharging propelling responsibilities empowers one if and only if moral consciousness is at the heart of it.
Rightly said, Ms. Srinidhi. I have another takeaway message from our conversation as an aspiring writer. I think for history to become relevant, it has to be told and retold. And to retell history, one shouldn't fear to get creative, but have this enabling and ennobling fear of being responsible for what the future generations will learn of our ancestors from such a retelling.
Very, very well said, Meghna. I'm immensely grateful to you for this illuminating conversation. I'm sure all the participants are as eager as us to listen to this author you've grown to love now. We're grateful to all the enthusiastic participants for your patient listening. Thank you, Sairam.
Srinidhi and Meghna, thank you very much for a very engaging discussion on the works of Miss Sai Swarupa Iyer. Now that we are familiar with the ideas in her writings, let us listen to the writer herself. It is my pleasure to introduce Miss Sai Swarupa Iyer, an illustrious example of authorpreneurship. Sai Swarupa Iyer is an Indian author who has published in the mythological genre. Her notable books are Abhaya, Avishi, Draupadi, and Mauri. Her latest edition of the novel, Avishi, was published by Bloomsbury earlier this October. Ms. Iyer has an MBA from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, and is a former investment professional. Her areas of interest include Indian epics, philosophy, startups, economics, history, and literature, and Carnatic music. She has also won a state-level gold medal from Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam in rendering Annamacharya Kritis. Miss Iyer is an Indian English author who has published novels in the genre of Puranic fiction. She is well known for her engaging storytelling abilities backed by thorough research. Her works received and continue to receive wide appreciation in the form of Amazon reviews and thorough reviews written in Swarajya magazine. She is also closely associated with Indic Academy and has written articles for Indic Today, their online platform for Shastras, Indic knowledge systems, and Indology. Let us listen to Ms. Sai Swarupa Iyer in a conversation with Sai Harshita, an enterprising postgraduate student of English language and literature.
Before beginning the session, as it is a tradition and my personal practice, I would like to offer my humble salutations at the divine lotus feet of my most beloved Bhagwan, Shri Sathya Sai Baba Varu. Today, we are going to be in conversation with Ms. Sai Swarupa Iyer, an best-selling author who's written 5 novels in the genre of mythological fiction. Thank you for joining us today, ma'am. Sairam.
Sairam, Srimatre Namaha. Thank you, Harshita. Thank you, Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, and thank you all the attendees. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a blessing. It's an honor to be a part of this program and be a part of any program, any event organized by Swami's College. Again, I join Harshita in offering my humble pranams to Bhagwan. So yes.
How are you doing, ma'am? How is change of scene from Bangalore to Anantapur now?
Yes, Anantapur is my native place. So it's home. It's as good as home, better than home.
Yes. So without much ado, I think we can plunge into our conversation. So I was just curious to ask this question. You are an IIT graduate. You are experienced in the field of corporate, and you are writing novels right now. So what was that spark that ignited you? Maybe it was some incident, some person, somebody who must have instigated that passion for writing. And how did you become the author that you are right now? It would be really nice to hear you talk about your journey as an author now.
So, thank you, Harshita, for that question. I think I'm afraid the answer is going to be very long if I start recollecting every inciting incident for whatever turned me into an author. But yes, before IIT, all that whole career and the corporate chapter started in my life. I think the first chapter of my life, if I should say, started with Swami. My parents, my grandparents, I think I'm a very proud, very blessed 4th generation devotee of Swami. So that's how I think that is something which I'd like to point out. And my journey with literature started more with Telugu than in English, when with me composing some compositions dedicated to Bhagwan.
Wow, that's really great.
I'd love to hum 2 lines of one of those compositions of
Sure.
I'm hoping the time permits for this.
Sure.
Nidamaganaamrutam Sai Nidamaganaamrutam Dinavana he Patisha Sai Nidamaganaamrutam Satya Dharma Shanti Premamayam Nityananda Sukha Pradayakam Satya Dharma Shanti Premamayam Nityananda Sukha Pradayakam Atyadbhutam Bhakta Jivagra Sadanam Atyadbhutam Bhakta Jivagra Sadanam Nidivyaganamrutam Sai Nidama Ganamrutam.
That was beautifully written and beautifully rendered, ma'am.
Thank you so much. it was a dream to render this before Bhagwan. One of those, I think around 2002, he had blessed us with an interview, 2001, August 26th. I remember the date. He had blessed me, my uncle and aunt with an interview where I had this opportunity to sing one of these compositions in his presence in the interview room, and he had blessed me with both his hands. That's one event which totally redefined me, I should say.
That's really great to know, ma'am. So
thank you. Thanks a lot.
So more about your journey.
Yeah. So coming to your question about writing, as I said, everything started with Swami. So even my introduction to our glorious past, the Puranic past, our Itihasas, the Puranas, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the philosophy, the whole corpus of cosmos of Hindu philosophy started with Bhagwan. My mother was blessed to be one of those first batch Balavikas gurus who were taught by Swami himself, and she was my first guru, apart in addition to my Balavikas guru. So I am a very proud Balavikas pass out. The foundation started from there, and my pride about Bharatiyata, it started from there. I was born with it. I was blessed to be born with it. And during my high school, early college, I had this conversation with a Muslim friend of mine who innocently asked me, why do you love Krishna so much? I mean, he had so many wives, and why do you guys worship Krishna with so much love? Devotion and all I can understand, but you guys love him. And then I told her the story of Narakasura Vadha. That's when Krishna rescues 16,000 women who were held against their will by Narakasura, and because they had nowhere to go, he married them, and he enabled them to come back to mainstream life in those times. And that's why we love him even more, because he did that. Right? We already love him for everything, and for this particular Leela of his, we love him even more. And the conversation ended there, and but that sparked a new idea within me to look at the world of Mahabharata, that world from at Krishna, in what all values he represented, dharma, everything from the perspective of one of those women that he rescued from the Narakasura's captivity. And that was when my first protagonist, as well as my first book, Abhaya, was born. I'm happy to say, firstly, I self-published Abhaya, and it's being relaunched by Bloomsbury in early 2022.
It's really nice to know. As a Bal Vikas pass out myself, I know that there's so much importance given to our itihasas, Puranas, our traditional stories. And Swami has created this beautiful curriculum where we understand each aspect of our tradition.
Exactly.
That I know from the experience of reading your works, I know that it shows in the way that you portrayed our itihasas and Puranas. So,
and Balavikas has been a holistic experience, right? I am glad you appreciate that, Harshita. It was enlightening and it was fun. It was a great combination of both, and it was such a very welcome break from the academics, as well as it was fulfilling from within, right? It was strengthening the core, not just giving us money.
Very true. So I just wanted to situate our conversation in the theme of our webinar, Authorpreneurship. Considering that your early works, you had self-published them, and then your works such as Draupadi and Rukmini, you traditionally published them. So for budding authors who are aspiring to get their works published, which would you suggest, self-publishing or traditional publishing? And also enlighten me on what are the pros and cons with both of these modes of publication.
Sure. So I would say the journey of an entrepreneur is much more than this one question or one decision between self and traditional. Short answer, I would say do both. Not stick to one, but do both. If you are one of those who got a traditional publishing author, great, wonderful, go with it, but also self-publish a couple of books to know the business side of books end to end. And if you are somebody who are self-publishing your first book or second book, don't stop there, plan more books. That's my shortcut advice. But coming to a journey of an author, right? And let us take inspiration from our own Indian poets, Harshita. So I am a Telugu native of Telugu land. So my inspiration are most of our Telugu poets. Potana, who wrote Srimad Andhra Mahabhagavatam, and the Kavitrayam, who wrote Andhra Mahabharatam. Right, and Potana has one interesting poem in Telugu. He says, Balarasala Sala Navapallava Komala Kapya Kanyakan, Kulala Kichi Appadapu Kudu Bujinchutakante, Halikulai Satkavul Halikulaina Nemi, Gahanantara Kanda Mula Kaudhalikulaina Nemi, Nijadara Sutodara Poshanarthamai. Here, Potana, when he's asked to dedicate his Andhra Mahabhagavatam to a local king or warlord, he says, this Bhagavatam is my Kavya Kanyaka. She's like my daughter, and I'm not going to give her hand, to somebody who doesn't deserve her. So instead of dedicating my Kavya Kanyaka to somebody who is not deserving of her hand, I'd rather go and cultivate and do agriculture as my profession and continue to write this poetry without giving in to pressures. So I'd call Potana as a pioneer of self-publishing, if I can take that. So as in the path of self-publishing, in the journey of an authorpreneur, of course, I'm not at all dismissing traditional publishing. We need them. They know the depths of business behind books. They know how to get books to the right audience. All the experience and wisdom is something which is very valuable to an author. So let me start from the first. An author's journey starts with this compelling story. Let it be either whether it's fiction or non-fiction, where you want to share your wisdom or domain knowledge, domain expertise, or biography, memoir, it can be anything. It starts with that compelling urge to share that with a larger audience. That's how you start, you begin your journey as an author. But to be an authorpreneur is about converting your passion or hobby into a profession. When you get the field of, we get the term of entrepreneurship into this, we have to think about financial sustenance, not just personal financial sustenance, but each of the books have to find a way where they pay for themselves, right? So that way, as an author, you would be giving up your career, or you would be writing on the side. There is a sacrifice that an author is doing. She may be giving up family time. She may be giving up personal time. She may be giving up career time. She may be, working part time for half the salary. So that the whole sacrifice of that journey, and the entrepreneur side of us has to make sure that pays itself. For that, I would advise, the first advice I would give to each of the entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, is to have your plan for the next 5 to 10 years. I would say ideally 20 books. I know it's a daunting number, but it's a proven research based fact from Western publishing that 20 books will definitely generate an income that would sustain you as an author. That's when you can totally sit back and depend upon the royalty or the income that would come because of your books. So that is the entrepreneur part of author, the writing part. Now comes the selling part, right? So marketing, and a lot of authors that I meet, I mentor authors, aspiring authors. A lot of authors I meet are somehow afraid of this term marketing. They think it's about giving some scary presentations with scary jargon to strangers, or they think it's like, it's as mortifying as going door to door and selling soap and getting doors slammed on faces. Marketing is not that. Especially marketing creative output, be it a book or be it painting or be it be it any art that includes literature. Marketing literature is about sharing value, and when you keep sharing value, you are benefiting others. And nothing to feel very high-handed about that. It's I would say it's a divine opportunity, like a seva, right? And I know Sai family understands the term seva very, very well. So it's a kind of seva that we are doing by sharing what is dear to us, what has compelled us to write, what the knowledge that has been helpful to us, we are sharing with the larger world. That's our duty, as well as a very enjoyable journey. So marketing is about that. So how to get noticed by your audience, how to identify your audience. So begin by defining, by profiling your audience. Would men like it? Would women like it? Of what age? College students would like it. Housewives would like reading it. Working men would try and find some time to read it. Would fitness oriented guys like it? Would romance lovers like it? So your book needs that profiling. Each book needs profiling of audience. What would they like? Like, for example, I have profiled my audience to be say around 18 to 40, kind of, ideally 18 to 40 aged people belonging to that group, both genders, and somebody who are educated, as well as they are they are exposed to the larger world, but they have this seeking to connect to their roots, and those are my audience. And very surprisingly, I have readers who are as young as 12 and 13-year-old, and I have readers who are as old as 70, 75 year, 80-year-old. Yeah, yes, he celebrated his 80 years birthday. So yes, that happens. That's a blessing again. But yes, write more books, profile your audience, and have a publishing schedule. Right? And when you self-publish, here I say self-publishing comes in very handy. You can have your publishing schedule in your hand, like publishing one book a year or publishing 2 books a year. Self-published authors, they work on a very tight schedule. I know authors who publish one novel a month, one novel every 3 months, one novel every 6 months, one novel every year. So they find their own comfort groove, but not less than one novel every year. They make sure that they publish. So once they start, once you start building this backlist, our self-publishing platform in India, the biggest self-publishing platform is Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. Right? And this is not to be taken as an advertisement for Amazon, but of course, I hope there is a good competition from other corporates to Amazon. But the fact is that that's the biggest e-commerce platform where readers reach out. So they are better positioned to run a self-publishing platform. So if there are any corporates watching this webinar, I would urge them to start a competing platform. And in a way, not, I love Amazon KDP, but there would be a healthy competition between, and that would again galvanize innovation. But yes, that's again going astray. Yes, so when you self-publish, your books are on KDP, your books are available on Amazon's platform at par with traditionally published books. And they have to look like professionally published. So there are aspects like cover design, there are aspects like editing. So once you are done with your manuscript, you hire an editor to hone up your manuscript. Maybe you hire a professional editor, that's a must. You can also take help of a couple of your friends who are good readers to take get their feel and take your time to hone your manuscript. Then you can hire a designer, or there are these portals like Canva. Then there are these portals like PhotoBucket, iStock Photo, a lot of sites that stock artistic photographs that may be a match. Otherwise, for my genre, I actually go through Instagram profiles of various artists and hire them for a couple of, for example, Unsung Valor was one of the anthology that we curated through Indica Academy. Bloomsbury published it. So this particular illustration was done by hiring an illustrator through Instagram, Chetan Adbirkar. So this, it has an investment to it, but once you hold a finished product, you know that it's just worth it. And the book looks, fortunately, we could publish it through Bloomsbury, but even when you self-publish it, it should look something like a traditional publisher, a professional publisher has published it. So even Bloomsbury was like really impressed with the cover that we managed to put together. So that's how you make your product at par, look at par. Once that first impression is got, nobody is going to bother to look at who is the publisher. A reader, an average reader, is interested on the topic and the author. If the author is already a well-known person, if these two are a match, publisher's name does not really figure out. Only when something is very doubtful about these two, then the reader goes and tries to check who's the publisher, right? But if you can convince them there, you got a reader.
So yes, ma'am.
Yeah, the last point is all these e-commerce portals, whether it is Amazon, whether it's Flipkart, and there are other newer platforms coming. They work on algorithms, right? And there is something called metadata, where when I upload the book on, again, for example, Amazon's platform, I would say, okay, I'm uploading Avishi. The title is Avishi. The subtitle is Story of Vishpala from Rig Veda. Author name is Sai Swarupa Iyer. Abhaya is already there with the metadata, which has author name as Sai Swarupa Iyer. And so the readers who have bought Abhaya will get an alert from Amazon itself saying, Sai Swarupa has published a new book. You may be interested in this book. And if there are somebody who are buying, like now Sai Swarupa has written a book, and say 2 years down the line, Sai Harshita writes a book, and there is an audience match between both of them. So my readers come and buy your book. Your readers will get alert about my books. Then Amazon understands, the algorithms understand that, oh, these two authors have a common audience, right? So whoever buys Sai Swarupa's new books, let us also try and push Harshita's books. So, the more buys happen on their website, that's good for them, and it's good for both of us. And once, and newer readers who buy my book, they'll think, okay, probably you will be interested in Sai Harshita's books. Right? That is how Amazon's algorithms build, and these things build when you have a bigger backlist. That is a list of books. So the authorpreneurship, it starts generating returns once you have a minimum of 3 or 4 books out there, which is why I again urge you all to think of 3 or 4 books. They need not be these bulky 100,000 word long full length novels. They can be novelettes, they can be novellas of 15,000 to 25,000 words. But the number matters. They can be short stories, they can be collection of short stories. So the number matters there, the number of titles on the platform, that matters before the algorithms start working in your favor. And I had another point to add. Yes, it's the world of creative entrepreneurs is not about competition, it's about co-opetition. Like how I gave an example between Sai Swarupa and future author Sai Harshita. It works in your favor when you encourage other authors. That's the best part of entrepreneurship. You don't need to pull down another author. You don't need, there's no scope for unhealthy competition over here. We authors take 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, sometimes more than 1 year to write and come up with each book. The readers finish reading it in 2 days, 3 days flat. So when we suggest other books, other authors' books that they would love, the readers love us more, and the other authors feel grateful to us, and they, in turn, they also recommend our books. So this is one of those beautiful, segments of entrepreneurship where there is no competition, but there is always co-opetition between authors. So that's quite a long response. I understand, Harshita, but I'm sure
that's not an issue, ma'am. That's not an issue. Like listening to you talk about the technical side of publishing a work, I just got this thought. I think maybe economics and ethics would be a befitting title if you get your biography published. So that was just a thing that I could gather up right now. And also, so much modernization and technology advancements has given us so much of a luxury to just publish works within a click, or it involves a lot of effort, yes, but still there's this luxury that self-publishing and modern advancements in technology has given us. So that was beautifully brought out by you in your really well detailed answer based on authorpreneurship. So
thank you.
I would say I'm an illiterate in this commercial world and more of being a literature-oriented student. So
let me interrupt you there, Harshita. There's nothing to be afraid of in the commercial world. Somehow, Western education, Western thought process of education has demonized commerce for us. They have demonized commerce. They have made profit sound like a dirty word. But Indian outlook looks at value, right? And when we feel happy when we buy something of good quality. Deepavali is about shopping. People celebrate shopping, so it's about spreading happiness. And profit is all about spreading that happiness. Only when it goes beyond the balance, again, Indian outlook looks at the purusharthas, right? So dharma, artha, kama, moksha, all of them have to be in that balance. We give each of these purusharthas their place. So yes, the world of commerce is a beautiful world if we stick to our ethics. If we have the strong spine. And if we have compassion.
Very true. But as a literature student, what interests me is your creative process, the research that goes behind your works. So in one of your interviews, you had mentioned that the inspiration for writing your novels stemmed from the desire to change the way our itihasas, our puranas, our traditional texts are portrayed and are viewed in popular culture. So while you were doing your research for your work, be it any of your novels, what were your go-to translations of the original text of our Puranas, and what were your primary texts, and are there any recommendations for readers who read your work and would want to go back to their roots, who are keen to read the primary texts?
Yes, my area of comfort, my domain of comfort is the Mahabharata. That's something which has been very dear to me since my childhood. I used to think of Pandavas as my brothers, and I have developed this kind of kinship with the characters of Mahabharata, with the people of Mahabharata. So that remains my most comfortable zone of biggest comfort, and that's where I think the most of my novels would spring, though I would also like to go out of comfort zone, like Vishpala, which is relaunched by Bloomsbury, is about a Rigvedic warrior. Rigveda is a world different from the Mahabharata. So yes, going out of comfort zone is also it's also very necessary. But coming to your question about sources, yes, always go back to unabridged source literature. So now, today we are blessed with the modern technology. We can order from anywhere. We don't have to, go from shop to shop hunting for those books. I would say if you are conversant with Indic languages, if your mother tongue, whether it is Telugu, Hindi, Kannada, or Tamil, or whatever language, always go back to unabridged translations from Sanskrit to that particular language. I think Gita Press has a wide variety of Indic translations. If you are comfortable only with English, Dr. Vivek Debroy has done stellar job of translating the whole of our corpus. That he started with Mahabharata. It's a 10-volume set, 6,000 pages of wonderful translation. It's a wonderful journey to go through. No need to get daunted about the size, because just trust the magic of Veda Vyasa. He ensures that you get pulled in and the pages will read by themselves. Dr. Debroy has even translated Ramayana. He has translated Bhagavata, and one by one the other Puranas are also coming. I think Markandeya Purana is out in the market, and yes, one by one each of the Mahapuranas are coming out, all his translations. They are the first go-to books to any aspiring author in this genre, the Puranic fiction genre. And then you can also you should also refer to scholarly works on related to the topic. Like when it comes to Mahabharata, I would suggest the works by Professor Vishwa Adluri, who has done again a stellar job of decoding the Indology part of it and actually extracting the value of Mahabharata from an academic sphere. Dr. Vishwa Adluri, I am just repeating the name. Then there are also these scholars in Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. The publishers, I remember, Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan has published especially in the time of Munshi Ji, who was the founder. They have published a lot of scholars. But if you are just starting, then to read the Ramayana, Mahabharata, I would say start with Chakravarti Rajagopalachari's small abridged editions, and then go towards Gita Press or Dr. Debroy's translations, or whatever. So, and yes, I guess the journey starts from there. You will find your own beautiful sources here and there.
Yes, ma'am. So that was actually a really good collection. I think you've read so much and you could actually, off your cuff, tell names of translations and words that you've used for research. So in one of your interviews, in one of your reviews for your book Rukmini, the reviewer states that creative license can become a synonym for casual corruption. So with umpteen number of books and a lot of authors writing in this genre of mythological fiction, which are based on our epics, how did you manage or bring out this balance between your source, the Puranas and the Itihasas and our epics, and your output, which are your novels?
So creative liberty, that's a very interesting term. It's the power of visualization, if I can say that an author is blessed with, and it needs to instill more of humility than arrogance. It just means that the author or the writer, the poet, whoever he is or she is able to re-visualize Vedavyasa's immortal stories, right? I mean, when we reading and understanding is something that's like a fact, fact-based thing. But if you are able to visualize and hear, Krishna, Draupadi, Arjuna, Yudhishthira talk, all the rishis talk, that is a blessing. And the way our visualization works may not be what Vedavyasa. It may not follow the exact path of Vedavyasa. But I'd love to give this metaphor of Bhagiratha and Ganga. Right? Bhagiratha had a single point agenda, a single point aim or ambition to get his ancestors blessed and lift their curse. So that is the reason why he invoked Ganga, and Ganga started following Bhagiratha. Bhagiratha has a path, he keeps leading Ganga towards where she has to reach. But Ganga's path is slightly different from Bhagiratha's. She diverges, she converges. There are tributaries that go in different directions, and all of them merge again. And if you trace the journey of Ganga versus the journey of Bhagiratha, the destinations are the same, but the journeys are beautifully different. So a poet's journey is like Ganga's journey. It's like Mother Ganga's journey, and Vedavyasa is our Bhagiratha here. So as long as we keep the Hridaya of the Rishi Hridaya, the Arsha Hridaya intact, that is our anchor point. As long as that is strongly anchored, I think we are good to take liberties. The problems arise when there is malice in that anchoring, right? And of course, I wouldn't like to take names of certain authors who have, who have their issue with this anchoring of the Rishi Hridaya. But yes, unfortunately, the last 3-4 decades have churned out a lot of literature that would make the reader ashamed of Indian culture instead of being proud of it. So I would say anything that makes you ashamed of your past is something that you should not take or not believe. So anything has to make you feel uplifted. That is real literature. I think Swami would endorse that thought of mine. So a true literature is going to uplift a reader. It's going to empower the reader. It's going to liberate the reader rather than make him or her feel just angry and unhappy about everything. Right. So yes, to the authors, aspiring authors, I would say make the end objective, to whatever, whether you write Itihasa, Puranic fiction, you may be writing romance, you may be writing crime thrillers, you may be writing biographies, which are inspiring. The end objective should be that the reader takes back value and applies it in the rest of his life. He finds a companion in the book, not somebody who, disturbs him.
That was a beautiful explanation, ma'am, especially that metaphor of Bhagiratha and Ganga. That was a really good way to bring out the parallels and the differences between how to place our intention and our creativity. So you were talking about visualizing and the creative imagination that an author requires. And when from reading your novels again, I can see that some scenes, some episodes in your novels, they are very carefully detailed and carefully visualized. So much so that there are certain fight sequences where when you read them, they jump out of the page and they're before your eyes, literally. So I just was curious to know what sort of preparation that you do before writing such episodes. Do you get into this mind space where you imagine to be maybe in the war field? Because there's so much of craft, skill involved in the Indian war tradition. So,
Yes.
and to bring it out in such beautifully, vividly detailed expressions is so it requires so much of craft. So how much of time do you take and in thinking and in visualizing and in preparing yourself to write these episodes?
So first of all, thank you. But because action scenes are something which I personally like to focus on as much as the other scenes. But yes, action scene. I mean, actually, the whole story, from beginning to end, is about action, and battle scenes or the fight scenes are just those points where the action reaches a pinnacle. It reaches a crescendo, right? So the I trick is a bad word for it, but the way to do it is in anchoring the perspective, right? So instead of imagining yourself as the author who is taking down notes, so seeing the scene and taking down notes, visualize yourself as the camera, as a video camera which is moving alongside that wonderful movie playing in your mind, and you're capturing exactly emotions. You're capturing not just action but the emotion and the effect of that action on the characters. So that's when I think any scene sees that beautiful experience from the reader, as you so wonderfully described. Thanks a lot. And that's the whole beautiful beauty of the author's journey, to discover that way to get readers' emotions activated. The rasa.
Yes. So again, looking at your visualization, looking at the amount of detail that goes into your writing, I was again very intrigued. Like I wanted to know. This is like a personal question. That what were your thoughts while you were penning down the opening scenes of Draupadi and Rukmini? Because they're really totally different perspectives. Like you have placed Uttara, the daughter-in-law, as the narrator of a mother-in-law story, that is Draupadi. So I don't know, it's a very fresh perspective for me, for that matter. It's very fresh for me. And at the same time, the opening scene of Rukmini, you've carefully contrasted this rigid belief of Rukmini and placed that belief of Rukmini parallel to the helplessness in Arjuna. So that contrast spoke to me in a way, I don't know, because I've imagined Arjuna to be the epitome of surrender, to be the epitome of friendship and epitome of faith in his friend. So to portray him in such a situation was so new. So how do you develop these fresh perspectives, and what were your thoughts while you were penning down these scenes?
So, if we limit the question to Draupadi and Rukmini, I'll come to Rukmini first. Arjuna, I mean, I think he is the true unsung hero of today's narratives, because there is so much that we need to learn from Arjuna. And, we kind of go for more faulty heroes. I don't know why, but there is maybe because we don't want to learn. Possible, right? Because being Arjuna is hard work. It's sheer hard work speaking. So Arjuna is that journey where human effort builds itself and snowballs into a pinnacle of excellence where God is compelled to be your companion. So that is Arjuna for me. And we see Arjuna in that stage where his God has physically left. So till then, and it is that Arjuna who fought that 18-day war with, losing so many people dear to him, right? His sons, his cousins, his not the cousins on the other side, but all his supporters on this side, his father-in-law, all father-like figures, his his daughter-in-law's father, Virata. So each day was a loss, right? But he was able to fight through those losses because of his Sarathi. And now that Sarathi has left him. Right. So again, this is not a fresh perspective. Again, I go back to Potana's Bhagavatam, where the way Arjuna describes Krishna's departure to Yudhishthira, he says, "Mana sarathi, mana chuttamu, mana bandhuvu, mana sakudu, mana bandhavudun, mana vibhudu gurudu devara manalanu vidanadi chaniye manujadhisha." He says, "Our sarathi." So it moves from Sarathi to God. Okay, the role of Krishna, he describes our Sarathi, because Sarathi is an employee, right? In generally, it's an employee. He takes a salary and he drives you. He also advises you on war strategy. He readies your weapons and he readies your chariot for tomorrow's war. That is the role of Sarathi. He places those arrows, sufficient number of arrows, sufficient number of bows. He basically knows your weaknesses as a warrior, and he has the power to take the decision. If he sees his Rathi faltering, he has the power to take the decision to take the chariot out of that duel, right? So the strategy, but again, it's a very defined relationship. Then it moves to Mana Chuttamu, says a relative. Our ally, Mana Viyamu, that is, marital ally through Subhadra, they are maritally related. So it, whoever is your Sambandhi, right? They have certain, there the relationship gets a little, it's not defined like Sarathi. Okay, I give you salary, you do this. It's not a job description, right? So they have some stake in your life. You have a stake in their life. Then it proceeds to friendship. So then it becomes much more, the definition, it's diffusing and becoming closer. And our Lord, he's the, Krishna takes our decisions. He's our Lord. And he's our Guru. It's not, Lord to, master and disciple, there is, there's a relationship. There's a guru and Sishya, there is a different relationship, and his God. So from the most definite relationship to the most abstract relationship of being a God and devotee, he has been everything. And he has left us. So what are we? That is the state of mind of Arjuna that I wanted to capture. So that is human excellence, at its pinnacle, but without its direction. So that is the turmoil of Arjuna that I wanted to see. And coming to Draupadi, it's about understanding, or an attempt to understand a very misunderstood woman. So there are two popular narratives about Draupadi. One is that she is this very vengeful woman who doesn't braid her hair till all her enemies are dead. And she keeps needling her husbands, why don't you guys do a fight? Kill them all. You bring Dushasana's blood. That's kind of... And the other narrative is even more cringeworthy narrative, is that she is victim. She had to marry 5 husbands, then, as if against her wish. Vyasa doesn't mention that, but she didn't. She wasn't interested in 5 husbands. She married them. She had to bear them, and from somewhere they invented this narrative that she was in love with Karna. Of all the people, of all the men of Mahabharata, I don't know why Karna, but then that she was staked up, in that game. So this victim mentality, right? She was just used as in that victim portrayal, which is again a very wrong portrayal and a great injustice to Draupadi's character, because the most painful incident of Dyuta Sabha, there she was dragged into the Sabha. That incident is actually where Draupadi shines. She's the hero of that episode. She's not the victim of that episode. She's the hero. I am using the word hero, not even heroine, because yes, she was dragged in a very painful manner. She was dragged, kicked, assaulted, abused in the most vilest possible manner. And one of her abusers was our favorite Karna too. But the way she handled it, right? She was given choice. When Duryodhana told her, you can escape all this if one of your husbands rebels against their brother and says, we have nothing to do with you. You and that particular husband of yours, you can escape. Or you desert your 5 husbands and choose anyone amongst us. You can get out of this mess. But she did not take that choice because in her heart, she knew that being married to Yudhishthira, she became the empress, right? And she has kept those 5 brothers united. She has played a role in building of Indraprastha and building of that whole empire. And one bad day, because of one bad day, one wrong decision, she was not going to let that go down the drain. So she argues, she puts forth a very pertinent legal question as to whether my wagering, the wagering of me by Yudhishthira, it's not legal, it's not valid because because he lost himself, so he doesn't have to stake me. If you believe that wife is a man's property, then you wouldn't have asked him to stake me. So you were asking him to stake me itself proves that I am not his property. And because he lost himself, he cannot stake me. That way, I am free. And that's how she so skillfully builds that argument and builds support for herself. Vikarna supports her. The rishis who are in the Sabha, they support her. Vidura supports her. Gandhari is forced to support her. Right? And the way she builds the support after being dragged like, called a slave and, all those abuses, she builds support. She almost bullies Dhritarashtra to annul the game, and she asks for the freedom of her husband. So all this is just so ignored in popular narratives. This is Vyasa's Draupadi, right? That is Veda Vyasa's heroine. That strength of Draupadi never found a mention in most of these popular narratives. She was just being used by agenda peddling authors, unfortunately, which is why I found Uttara as a very inspiring narrator. She has the distance and closeness. She just has the perfect combination of distance and closeness. She had Draupadi serving her as a beautician for say a year that year. So that way she would have had the closeness to her, and then she becomes daughter-in-law of the same family. She enters the Pandava family and she gets to see each of the family members. She gets to see their strengths and weaknesses. So I found Uttara as the ideal storyteller and Janame Jaya as the ideal listener. Because the listener, the story seeker in Indic storytelling traditions needs to come with an adhikara. Right, and Janame Jaya has the adhikara. He has already heard the whole story from Vaishampayana, Rishi Vaishampayana, who's the disciple of Veda Vyasa. So I couldn't find any better story listener. And he's also a grandson of Uttara. So they share that grandparent-grandchild relationship, which is again a very beautiful relationship in our Indian context when it comes to storytelling. So that was my intention.
It is actually fascinating to know that like 3 pages or 4 pages of a book has so much that goes beyond the boundaries of words, pages, and there's so much. This is all brain work, I would say, like more than physical act of writing and getting it out, expressing through any means of articulation. It's all brain work. So
it's hard really work. It's from heart, and you don't feel of course, yes, there is this matter of sitting for those many hours and typing away and testing if it really has that effect, or if it does it really have all those words, all those carry those emotions, does it do that? I mean, all those things are part of the process, but yes, the involvement should be from here.
That's a really good way of looking at it. Yes. So, ma'am, actually, this was another straying away from Draupadi. I wanted to talk to you about your other two works too, Avishi and Abhaya. In Avishi, you have this, as you had mentioned in one of the answers previously. In Avishi, it's this Rigvedic world. It is divisionless, sectionless. There's no differences between anything there. Man, woman, no differences generally. So it's this utopian setup. Whereas in Abhaya, it's the grey world of Mahabharata. It's chaotic, filled with social evils, kind of dystopian, edging towards dystopia. So, what was your experience of creating such starkly different worlds? And also, and what were the insights that you draw from such contrasting creations?
So actually, this utopia, dystopia again is comes from the Western way of thinking. I know as literature students, you would be reading them really deeply, and that is enriching. That's a very enriching perspective. I won't deny that. But Indic way of looking at the world is cyclical. Right? There is Srishti, there is Sthiti, and there is Laya. Srishti is the creation time. Right? And a lot of rules don't exist. Only when things are created, beings are created, setups are being built, only then we get to know what are the rules needed, to keep these going. So rules are made as creation is being made. So it is very much possible that, say, the society at that period, like Rigvedic period, is liberal. Right? It was really, really liberal because it was the Srishti time of our civilization. The Srishti time is not, I don't mean it like the Puranic worldview where there is Brahma creating Prajapati by Prajapati and, telling them, okay, go forth and create your own clans and all. That's again another very beautiful metaphorical way of looking at Srishti, where everybody is connected to this creator Brahma, and from Brahma we pass to the supreme being, whether it is Vishnu or Shiva or Shakti or whoever it is, Arishtadeva. So, but Srishti comes with a lot of, what do you say? There are a lot of moving parts. We don't know what works which way, which is why the rules are still liberal. Even the rishis, they are contemplating of what works, what doesn't work, what has stopped working, and what can make it work. So that is the time where the story of Avishi, the Vishpala, story of Vishpala took place. And coming to Mahabharata, right, that is the period leading from Sthiti to Laya. And ideal Sthiti state is Ramayana, where Rama knows that the world is now in a perfect order, but so I will do whatever it takes to, keep it going. Right? Even if it takes a personal sacrifice, like separating from Sita. Even Sita does not exactly, she doesn't question Rama when he leaves her, when she was pregnant. I mean, that's a painful event for us as devotees, but somewhere that couple, that divine couple, knew that the world, the larger world, is in an ideal state. So if one sacrifice by us keeps it going the way it does, let us do that. So that was their level of clarity, and the larger world proceeded like it did. It required some sacrifices from the royal family, but otherwise the larger world was happy. It was stable. It was prosperous, and they kept it. Our ancestors, they kept it going. The Avatara Purushas, they kept it going. And then comes the Mahabharata world, where rules stop. The rules stop sustaining, and they are being bent and abused for selfish ends, like the way Duryodhana took advantage of Yudhishthira's commitment towards the code. saying, you know, a Kshatriya king cannot reject a call for dice. So you know that this is the rule here. So we can trap Yudhishthira into this game. And okay, Pandavas, they never deny elders. So Father Dhritarashtra, you send them to Varanavata, and there we will, burn them. So Mahabharata is the time where adharmic forces got to game the rules. That is when changing of rules is needed, right? That is when somebody has to take control of the situation and show who is the boss, Krishna. Right? So that is the Laya period, which is why you find the same rule which was non-existent, or everything seemed very hunky-dory in the world of Rigveda. The same world, it has degenerated to the point where women could not, once they have gone to this place of Narakasura, they couldn't find, they can't dream of getting back to mainstream life if not for Krishna's intervention. So that kind of degeneration of the world order, it's cyclical. It keeps happening, and the world order gets redefined once Kurukshetra happens, and we follow that cyclical process.
Yes, ma'am, that was very insightful to listen to this perspective. I know I read somewhere that this Indian epics and all the whole Indian view of the world is cyclical. Like every part of it is very so everything is connected. Whatever happens, you have the 4 yugas which again keep happening,
Yes.
coming again. So it was really insightful to know this. So the final question for our conversation would be: I noticed that you have acknowledged Bhagwan in Draupadi. So I wanted to ask you what influenced you the most? Bhagwan's vision, his perspective of the Indian culture. What influenced you so much that you did mention that Bhagwan is the source from where you pick up and write your novels. Bhagwan is the inspiration. So I just wanted to know what part of his ideology, the moral ideology that Swami always talks about, that has influenced your writing, your perspective of our Puranic traditions.
So not just about Draupadi, Harshita, I owe everything to Bhagwan to start with. But yes, coming to Draupadi, there is this interesting incident. So I was writing this Yuddha Sabha chapter, and stuck because it's a difficult chapter to write. It's a difficult section to, it's a whole difficult event to visualize and place myself in her shoes and experience that. It's a painful thing. I was stuck at places, and then there was some event happening in Satyasai Junior College at Anantapur town, and my father happens to be a correspondent. So I accompanied him for the event, and I guess there was some either delay or something. So I just found myself waiting in the room there. There was Swami's life-size, larger-than-life photograph in that room, and a chair, a throne placed for Swami. So then thankfully, I had brought my laptop. I was just, hoping to get some time to type. And in that room, looking at Bhagwan's photo, I got this inspiration to the way to look at, to reverse the whole narrative of Draupadi from being a victim to a hero. Right? Because Bhagwan speaks a lot, he speaks a lot about the roots of being a Bharata, right? And being a Bharatiya is it's not just about empty pride, it's about standing up when we are required to stand up for things, right? It's about that courage and showing the spine when you are needed to show that fine. And I thank Swami, and then the chapter wrote itself. The way events panned out in the chapter, and finally I could tie up loose ends there, because it was not an angry Draupadi. I didn't want an angry Draupadi. Again, I'm pandering to the other incomplete narratives. I wanted a Draupadi who could reverse the whole situation and walk away like the queen she was. So finally, that's what Dhritarashtra does, right? I mean, he says, okay, forget the game has happened. You guys go back. Let's forget this whole painful day. Take back your kingdom. Let's like live like before. That's what Dhritarashtra says. Then there was again a second game of dice, which was which is another story. But that particular scene had Draupadi coming in, being dragged in, forced in, and she changed the game there. So that is the one point which Swami inspired with him, and I felt like I should acknowledge it there.
It's really good to know that, ma'am. It was really, I can't believe that it's already 1 hour, 5 minutes that we've been in this conversation, and
Wow.
and I've gathered so much knowledge, so much insight into the art of writing, art of publishing, and also how much effort, how much research, how much of emotion goes into writing novels, and especially connecting with our culture and using it to our creativity and imagination. It entails a lot of our presence, our ethical, our moral, our creative presence. So I thank you so much for joining us today in this conversation, ma'am. So I'm really honored to be here, and gained a lot. That's what I would conclude by saying.
The feeling is mutual. I feel blessed to have been a part of this whole webinar. It's one of my, it's a privilege to attempt to give back what I have learned from Swami and the world, the outlook which I developed because of Swami and because of my parents who have put me onto that path, my mother and father, grandparents, everyone. So it's a great opportunity for me to give back to the ecosystem. I congratulate you. This is a very unique event, very insightful talks from the other authors. So congratulate you. May you conduct more such events, and may a new breed of writers, authors, opinion makers, policy makers emerge from your blessed campus that would change the destiny of this nation and this world. That's my prayer. Thank you again for this opportunity. Sai Ram.
Thank you, ma'am. Sai Ram, ma'am.
So that was indeed a very scintillating and enriching session. Thank you, Ms. Swarupa, for sharing with us your experience of being a very successful entrepreneur. From the melody in the Kriti you rendered to the very practical and encouraging tips you delivered to the aspiring writers, ma'am, I'm sure you have left the listeners with many inspiring insights and thoughts. From the treasure of Indian mythology, the valuable tales and the insights that you have captured in your talk now and also in your works, ma'am, that is the seva as a writer, as you rightly mentioned, you are rendering to the whole world. Thank you so much, ma'am, for this beautiful experience. And thank you, Harshita, for the very thoughtful and thought-provoking questions. After the day-long treat of discussions and deliberations with the authors and on their works, I'm sure we are sumptuously full of new thoughts, ideas, perspectives, and insights. So, we have successfully come to an end of today's proceedings. Now, we have a valedictory session, and we request Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Sir, to deliver his valedictory address. To introduce, Sir, I now call upon Dr. Prashant Luthra, Assistant Professor of English.
It is my honor to introduce Professor Dr. C.B. Sanjeevi, the Vice Chancellor of Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. Professor Sanjeevi has been serving at the Karolinska Institute, a medical university in Stockholm, Sweden, since 1989. He heads the Diabetes Immunology Research Group at the Center for Molecular Medicine and is affiliated to the Department of Medicine. Karolinska Institute is known for selecting and awarding Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine. Dr. Sanjeevi has won several awards, and the most notable one was the Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Award from the Government of India. He received this award on 9th January 2017 in Bangalore from the President of India. It is the highest honor conferred on persons of Indian origin in recognition of their achievements both in India and abroad. Dr. Sanjeevi has won several other prestigious awards in the field of diabetes from EASD and Diabetes Research Foundations. He has been a visiting professor at several universities. His genuine interest in all fields of knowledge and his constant support and guidance for the betterment is absolutely laudable. This retreat is just one example of an event backed up by his direct support and encouragement. I request Vice Chancellor Sir to give his valedictory remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Prashant Luthra. My humble pranams at the Lotus Feet of Bhagwan. It gives me a great pleasure to give the valedictory address. What I see as an interesting topic called exploring authorpreneurship. Now, when you look through the day's proceedings, you will realize it's not just exploring, it's exploding authorpreneurship. So this is a new terminology, and this new terminology is getting more and more visibility and attention. When the pandemic broke out and the physical events could not be arranged, seminars turned into webinars. At SSSIHL, the English language department pioneered the first webinar, which had a very important luminaries amongst its participants and speakers. Especially, we had Mr. S. Gurumurthy as one of the speakers who delivered an excellent talk. Today, it is the Retreat Edition 2 on a topic of relevance, the authorpreneurship. It's a blend of author and entrepreneur. So nowadays, everybody is expected to have the entrepreneurial bend in whatever they are doing. This has become an important aspect when in India we are exploding into a world of startups and Atmanirbhar. So we need to find new ways to understand and exploit the available opportunities in the entrepreneurship. Today, we have moved from print books to ebooks, Kindle books, and Kindle direct publishing. One needs not only to write, but also should learn how to sell what one writes. So this requires a special talent. The old-fashioned way of writing books, chasing publishers, is really not the best way, as you can see. Clearly, writing is a talent. You need to have some special skills for that. You need to be mentally a different breed altogether. But what other characteristic factors go into the formula for a successful author? Many people, if you ask, would say that I too want to write a book sometime in my life. But how many do? When they did a survey in United States, 85% of the people who participated in the survey wanted to write a book sometime in their lifetime. But hardly few really make the effort and write a book. And I'm sure this would influence many of our faculty in the English department to become authorpreneurship and start writing their books. If I could get the first book, I'll be the entrepreneur for all the authors in our faculty. But today, as you can see, with the pandemic that is prevalent, the world of digital technology has exploded, where we are embracing the digital technology in ways that we cannot imagine. Today, digital technology is strongly influencing how we use writing, how we communicate ideas, and how we publish for tangible circulation. Welcome to the new world of publishing, an industry in the midst of more radical change than in the entire last 100 years combined. The role of the author, publisher, and even the definition of book are morphing and changing in this context. And we will continue to change well into the next decades. And the amount of change that we are embracing is going to be faster than what we embraced in the past decades. So nowadays, from the author, more is expected than the old publishing model. In this new model, authors take on more responsibilities and tasks than ever before. Where one publishers paid for most sales and marketing expenses, now authors write marketing plans, pay for their own travel, and sometimes hire their own publicists to ensure the success of their books, even with a signed publishing contract from a commercial publisher. So you don't have to, at some time point, go and chase people. If you have the entrepreneurship skills, you can be on your own and reach the people in ways, more than one ways, with your book. No wonder some authors decide to take charge of their own careers and choose to self-publish. Yet some will have a better chance of success than others. In this new world, successful authors embody some of the same skills and characteristics of successful entrepreneurs. And these authors are called as authorpreneurs. This is the title of today's meeting. When I checked the Oxford Dictionary, I just could not find the word authorpreneurship. Oxford Dictionary still hasn't got this word included, nor does it give it a meaning. So when you search for the word, it asks, do you mean entrepreneurship or do you mean authorship? So it doesn't yet got it that there is an authorpreneurship, something that is available, that they should hopefully include it in the Oxford Dictionary. So it has to be a fairly recent terminology. This word has been in vogue only during the past decade. In the world of online communication, authorships and entrepreneurships have merged into a new word where the author learn how to publish a book and also market it as a business venture. So this is an excellent startup idea too. And this is done predominantly in the online world. And the online world has expanded phenomenally in the COVID times, and it's going to expand even more in the post-COVID times, I'm sure. So this hopefully might put an end to the print form as well as we move forward. So there are so many ways where you can get your books listed, and some of the ways by which the entrepreneurship part for the author is to try and get their books listed in some of their bestseller list. Like the best one that people go for is the New York Times bestseller list. So Amazon also has their own bestseller list, and reaching some of these bestseller lists is an immediate way by which you can get attention to your book and ensure that the book reaches certain publication or purchase level so that many people buy. So Amazon has a book by Sharon Jenkins called Authorpreneurship, The Business of Writing, as its bestseller. Another successful entrepreneur is Rochelle Carter, and she has a paperback and an online edition on 7 steps to authorpreneurship. You have lots of blogs. Blogs also have become a way of literary contribution. Many bloggers have tremendous following. The millions of followers you have wouldn't get translated into so many dollars from the people who wanted to have you endorse their book or endorse their products. The larger following translates into larger revenues, of course, through online advertisement incomes. So this is where the entrepreneurship part in the author has to flourish. The Economist, which is one of the famous business magazines, has also taken up authorpreneurship as a topic in one of their volumes. This has become such a big thing, that Economist has featured in this as a new avenue of the future of business. The Economist says that celebrity endorsements help the book soar up in charts. Some of the people have used celebrities like Oprah Winfrey, and the moment you discuss your book in her show, it hits the top 10 bestseller list immediately if you're outside the top 10. Because more people get to see it and more people get the curiosity and go and buy it. For me, I follow Bill Gates, and Bill Gates gives a list of books that he is reading and he enjoys. And this is really helpful in selecting some of the books that I choose to read from his list. So I'm sure there are so many different people who are promoting so many different authors, and this is one form of entrepreneurship. So you need to get the visibility. Entrepreneurial authors find it more effective to devote themselves to a more achievable aim. This is what I said earlier, getting into the bestseller list. The secret of such lists, the most prominent of which are those in the New York Times, is that they do not measure total sales, but their velocity. How quickly you get into the top 10 list. Books that fly off the shelves in their first week when they make the list, that in turn boosts their subsequent sales because you can always claim that you had been in the top bestseller list. Another way of trying to get their book, get the attention it needs is, of course, pre-orders of the books all count towards the first weeks of sales figures. So canny authors try to get people to buy copies in advance of the publication. So we have several bestseller lists in addition to New York Times, other ones being the Amazon and other portals. Now, many of the Indian magazines have their own literary section where they recommend some of the newly released books with certain kind of grading. Some of the authors use their celebrity status. Once they have become a successful author, they continue their entrepreneurial skills by doing lecture tours and have revenues generated from those lecture tours. This feeds into further sales because each time you go and give a lecture, you're going to talk about your book, and that book sales is definitely going to shoot up. And I was a witness to one of those book promotion events, a lecture tour by none other than Michelle Obama, who came to Stockholm and gave a talk about the book that she had published. And of course, people had come to see her, and 50,000 people filled the stadium to listen and talk to her about, and there was also a question and answer session in that meet. So it is a big business, and in many occasions is author driven. That is very important. So it's become a common word now that you might not find a time very soon that you might find a book on the bookshelves saying Authorpreneurship for Dummies. I'm sure in the coming decades, because many of those agencies that give awards for the best literary works may not take into consideration the authorpreneur books. Maybe in the coming years or decades, the Swedish Academy might consider Nobel Prize for Literature for self-published books too. And we'll have to wait for the day, whether it is Booker Prize or other prizes that are of prominence, should also take this into consideration rather than look for books from the conventional sources. So it's heartening to note that the English department has picked up what is topical, combining literature with a life skill, promoting what you write. And this is a new skill, and I hope that over the years we will make it into a bigger affair. And this event that the English language department headed by Dr. Ani has taken up new areas to explore and ensure that people think differently than what they have been thinking conventionally. So on this occasion, I'm also glad that the English department has taken the lead in the university to come up with a Google site for the department. This is one place to showcase all their achievements, to document all their work-related pages, to showcase creative writing, which emerges from their department through students and staff of English department. The G site will also capture the history of the department, have info about the stalwarts associated with the department in the past, those contributing to the department in the present, etc. It will be a one-stop shop for all that matters and related to the department. My only advice is try and make this site as much visible as possible and make it as much popular as possible. And you should have a page for Google, not Google, Facebook and social media to represent this Google site for the English department. So my congratulations on those who have conceived it and those who have worked hard to make it a reality. And I'm very eager to find out how this whole thing comes out and in flying colors, I'm sure. So with these words, I retreat giving way for a brief tour of the G site. Thank you and my best wishes to the Department of English for many more such events and achievements to happen in the future. Jai Sai Ram. Dr. Mitali, I can't hear your voice. You're silent. Maybe you're muted on your side.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Now I can hear
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for your thoughts on entrepreneurship and also for giving valuable information on the same. And I must say here, sir, your encouragement always pushes us beyond what we believe we can achieve as faculty members and helps us advance professionally. And one of the outcomes of your encouragement, sir, is this webinar, as well as the initiative to make a Google site for the department. Thank you so much, sir. Every institution needs a vision. Every team needs objectives to guide purposeful activity. The Department of English has been one of the oldest departments of Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. Stalwarts of the kind of Professor V.K. Gokak, a Gyanpith Award winner, and the first VC of Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, were associated with the department, its vision, with the designing of its courses, its course structure, etc. It has a history. It has rigorous activity. It has camaraderie. It has memory. So now I request the head, Department of Languages and Literature, to take us through a virtual tour of the Google site. Ma'am.
Om Shri Sai Ram. On behalf of all of us at the Department of Languages and Literature, I make this offering to our beloved Bhagwan, respected Vice Chancellor Sir, and everybody else in this gathering. It's our pleasure now to take you through a quick tour of the Google site that we have envisioned for ease of communication, documentation, and display of the activities of the department. It's a very humble effort to bring together everything that the department does. A sense of the past is important to chart the future course. Like Dr. Mitali just mentioned, with the department has been the association of stalwarts like Professor V.K. Gokak. We've also had, from the earliest times to the very recent past, when we've had Professor Panduranga Rao, the first R.K. Narayan scholar in the country and a Penguin published writer. When we look at the different courses that we offer at the department, there is so much history to when each course began and how many students take each course. When we look at the different research activities that we have been involving ourselves in, from the latest, the Spark sessions initiated by our Vice Chancellor, Sir, to the international conferences at which our staff members have presented or been present, to the events that have been organized by the department, to the students and their interactions and achievements, the different resources that make learning and teaching fun and effective at the department, everything we hope to capture at one place here. And the icing is the blog that we have newly launched. We have been talking since morning about authorpreneurship, and one more intent behind this Google site is to allow the creative writing of our students and faculty members to be posted on these blogs. This is a very brief idea of what this Google site intends to achieve. It's still in the making, and going forward, we will be adding more and more material, content, and happy moments to this. To every one of my colleagues who worked really hard to make this a reality, I offer my appreciation for the teamwork and the hard work. And to the viewers, I hope, to departments across institutions, this can be a model that easily captures and displays, exhibits what their activities, academic and otherwise, are like. Thank you. Jai Sai Ram.
Thank you, ma'am. No webinar is complete without a vote of thanks and closing remarks. I now invite Dr. Prashant Luthra to introduce Dr. Venkatramana, Assistant Professor of English, who would be delivering a vote of thanks.
Dr. B. Venkataramana is Assistant Professor in the Department of English, Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. His areas of specialization include romantics, new literatures, and literary criticism and theory. I request Dr. B. Venkataramana to offer his vote of thanks.
Om Sri Sai Ram. Invoking the benediction of our most beloved Bhagwan on all of us, which has ushered us into the second edition of Literary Treat, a webinar series on life, language, and literature, themed this year as Exploring Authorpreneurship, organized successfully by the Department of English Language and Literature, Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. I cherish the pleasure of proposing a vote of thanks, culminating to a complimentary close of this event. At the very outset, I would like to thank Professor of English and Director of Anantapur campus, Rajeshree Patel ma'am, for her welcome remarks that have extolled our efforts and prompted us to aim and take our endeavors to great heights. Now, I would like to thank our administration for its resolve and unstinted support in helping us embark on our pursuit and interests that bring laurels to this institute. Our revered Vice Chancellor, Sir, Professor Dr. C.B. Sanjeevi, ignited our minds with his eloquence and his valedictory remarks. My thanks are also due to our beloved Registrar, Sir, Professor B. Sai Giridhar, Sir, for his instant approval to gear up for the event. I also thank Sri Sanjay Sahani, Sir, our Controller of Examinations, for being a part of this event. I also wish to thank the directors of all the campuses for rendering their helping hand in arranging students for the event. Let me now have the honor of thanking a string of writers who have consented to be our distinguished guests for the event. I would like to thank Ms. Usha K.R., Indian English novelist, who has shared a figment of her mind with us. One important aspect that we should take note of the author is her penchant for tracing change in society. She talks about the changes brought in society by once alien concepts like globalization, privatization, and the IT revolution. I also thank Sri Shiv Arur, journalist and author, for sharing his profound viewpoints with us. I would also like to thank Ms. Anushka Ravishankar, an acclaimed children's writer, for giving us her time to gain her insights. In the same vein, I also thank Ms. Sai Swarupa Iyer, a notable mythological fiction writer of national fame, for her powerful deliberations of the epics. A multifaceted author, she dwells elaborately on a gamut of skills that augment the aspirations of a writer and enthuse them to publish their work successfully. In fact, we have reaped a rich harvest from these writers, and the lore is priceless. The proceedings of the webinar have been richly inlaid by the contribution of our fraternity in the department and our students and research scholars who complement us with their share of presentations, deliberations, and interactions with our distinguished guests. I thank Dr. Siddharth Raju, Assistant Professor, Prashant Nilayam Campus, Ms. Aarti RM, Assistant Professor, Anandapur Campus, and our students, Ms. Sai Harshita, Graduate Student of English Language and Literature, our postgraduate students of English Language and Literature, Anandapur Campus, our dear students from MEN campuses, our very dear former students of the University and Music College, Mr. Saish and Mr. Mayank, for the technical support and all involved in the organizing team, who have all synthesized their best efforts to make this event really eventful. I shall be failing in my duty if I don't acknowledge the will and volition of our HOD, Dr. Rani PL, in spearheading the event and pulling strings together to set the event on track. My duty is not done if I don't mention our dear colleague, Dr. Bhargavi, Assistant Professor, Anantapur campus, for meticulously coordinating and framing the event with exceptional flair and alacrity. I thank all others who have directly or indirectly involved in this event, supported us to witness the success of it. Thank you all. I now request the audience to hold on and stay tuned for a few more minutes to listen to our HOD's closing remarks. Sai Ram.
Good evening, dear viewers. As you prepare to leave this webinar, allow me to make a few observations and carry home messages as a part of this webinar's concluding session. The word treat is exciting to anyone. In her interview, the novelist Madam Usha observed that the title, Lit Treat, was very appropriately selected because she said, literature in itself is a treat. So as always, what we tried to bring you was a delectable variety of dishes from literature, from a very modern perspective, where people combine creativity with commerce. I must admit at the very outset that we have been biased towards creativity and have had more share of conversation with creativity than we've had apportioned to commerce. When we began, our intent was, with the regular convention of Sri Sathya Sai Institute, to begin every event with a Vedic chants. As the Department of English, we were bringing to you the English translation. I'm afraid a little bit of technical glitch didn't allow us to complete that bit of the event. Shiv and Siddhartha, I think they were battling between fact and fiction. As a journalist, one needs to report facts. As a fiction writer, one needs to get into the world of fiction. And Shiv was very clear about how he switches roles between the two. The gripping tales of military heroism that he currently writes about has actually, although he said he doesn't like the word viral, nor me, especially after the virus has hit us, but for lack of a better synonym, I must say, has gone viral in the nation. Even as we all know what the forces at the borders do to avoid a bomb from extinguishing us, it's only when you read real life tales written by people who have a sense of the facts, the ground realities, and conscious of the narrative styles in which they write, can we have the vicarious experience that we have when we read Shiv Arur. They were all tales of death and killing. I still can't take it off my mind, the sentence that he made about sitting amidst corpses and making his report. This is the reality of the life of a writer. And that brings me to actually a question that I was debating in my own mind and had a discussion with somebody very scholarly. What is, if there is any, the difference between a writer and an author. And at the end of our discussion, I remember coming to our own conclusion that a writer can be a writer of a journalistic report, a blog, a magazine article, but an author is always probably an author of a book. Here is Shiv, who combines the two in him. Talking to Usha KR was a pleasure, but the carry home message that the publisher, the writer, and the reader should be a triad that works not at cross purposes, but with the same purpose and intent of conveying what the society needs to hear. In an age of unrestricted self-publishing, I want to underline a phrase that Madam Usha used in her conversation with me. She said, sometimes a rush of words can lead to a slush of prose. And as an academician, I sincerely hope that this unrestricted, unrestrained activity of self-publishing, I hope does not lead to a slush of prose, causing the climate crisis that we have in the world around. This would be a climate crisis in the world of literature then. Anushka told us how there are many little ways to expand the world of a child. She told us how the anecdote that she shared about the co-passenger asking her this question about why she writes what she writes, and eventually came up with the answer that probably the first step is to get people interested in reading and then maybe in what they read. I personally found it very interesting that she drew this very clear divide between editing, which she says she enjoys a lot more than writing, and writing that she described as a transcendent process. This is something that maybe if we note, we will not land up in a slush of prose. Illustrations which add color to our thoughts is another aspect that the artists amongst our listeners can explore maybe. Sarupa, you have actually compelled me to replace actually in my vocabulary mythological with Puranic. And what do I say about that enlightening, engaging, and rich session that combined in it all of what we wanted to hear from an authorpreneur in the true sense of the word? That the Sri Satya Sai Bal Vikas program has a deep impact with its Puranic stories in its curriculum, Sarupa stands a testimony to that. She spoke about how you can make your passion into a vocation. She talked about how it is different being an author and being an authorpreneur. There are additional skills that one needs. Having said all this, I must say, from what our revered Vice Chancellor Sir mentioned, when he was talking about the Oxford Dictionary and the word authorpreneurship missing in the Oxford Dictionary, what came to my mind is we're all talking about the business of writing, literally and metaphorically. Some years ago, if we mentioned the phrase the business of writing, it would mean something totally different from what it means in the technology-driven world. What is the relevance of the entire day's proceedings? We are particular that time is precious, and our viewers who signed up to listen to us from 9 to 5 should have something personal, benefiting them out of these deliberations. They are not some mere interesting sessions that you listen to and go back and forget about. The pandemic is upon us. Or maybe I must mind my grammar and say, the pandemic has been upon us. Maybe we are slowly getting released from the grip of this virus. That was an experience for humanity at large. We have records of the bubonic plague right up to SARS-CoV because somebody cared to write about it. Maybe Boccaccio in his Decameron. Maybe some recent writers. In fact, if you go to Oxford bibliography list, you will find a list of books that talk about pandemics and their effect on history. You will find Random House books which deal with pandemic as a recurring motif in literature. Let's hopefully presume and assume that the virus is slowly retreating from our normal lives, which turned abnormal for the last 2 years. And as it goes, there has been so much experience that each of us, writer or not, garnered through these months. In fact, how would we have known what happened in history in the year 2020 and 2021 had nobody recorded it? This is a question that will come to anybody's mind 20 years from now or 10 years from now. Therefore, if there is a writer hidden inside us, maybe in the form of a blog, maybe in the form of a short story, maybe in the form of a verse, maybe in the form of a novel, maybe some amongst you, maybe all amongst us will come out and record it because we owe it to posterity. After all, Barack Obama said, books and reading, in fact, he says, talking about reading, it is a gateway skill. It is a gateway skill that opens doors to all other knowledge. So only if we make it available for reading will history last for humanity. What is an exercise for the physical body is reading for the mind. And an hour spent reading is one stolen from paradise, said Thomas Wharton. So we hope this entire day has been for each of you a fruitful reflection for yourself on your habits of reading, on your ability to express and write, and maybe to add to that what you can do with your writing, because if you have an unpublished manuscript, like I said in the morning, it's like a baby unborn. So dear viewers, which I presume consist of academicians, students of literature, avid readers, if you are a reader, you become eligible to be a leader for tomorrow. Let us keep this habit of reading going. And as Stephen Fry interestingly said, books, because these are days of ebooks and audiobooks. Even ebooks are dying because audiobooks have come. This dynamic change will happen in every society and in every civilization. But what keeps me hopeful is what Stephen Fry said. Books are no more threatened by Kindle than staircases by elevators. Books can never die. So the habit of reading should never die. And for the habit of reading to survive, the habit of writing should continue. Thank you very much. The Department of English Language and Literature is humbled to offer this entire day's proceedings to its divine founder chancellor, who we firmly believe makes all this happen. Happy days ahead with your reading. Thank you for your participation, which has largely encouraged us to already plan our Lit Read Edition 3. Thank you. Jai Sai Ram.
असतो मा सद्गमया तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमया मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमया शांति शांति शांति।